Good evening, councillors and our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Lena Messina and I'm the Mayor of the City of Darebin City Council, and the chairperson of tonight's council meeting. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's council meeting. I declare we have quorum and I also declare this meeting open. Number one, welcome. Darebin City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners and custodians of the land and waters we now call Darebin, and pays respects to their elders past, present and future. Council pays respect to all other Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander communities in Darebin. Council recognises and pays tribute to the diverse culture, resilience and heritage of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the leadership of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and the right to self-determination in the spirit of mutual understanding and respect. The health and safety and well-being of our community has and will always be paramount consideration of the Council. Council continues to be guided by the government directives and wants to be able to do the right thing for the health of our community during the COVID-19 pandemic. Whilst councillors are meeting in person tonight, the latest advice from Local Government Victoria is that the public should not be permitted to attending the meeting. So until this advice changes, we will maintain these arrangements. This meeting is being live streamed by link on council website, so the public will be able to view the proceedings of the meeting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be available on the council website as soon as practical after the meeting. Before we begin tonight, I want to set out expectations in regards to our behaviour and remind councillors of our obligations under the Code of Conduct. At Darebin, we pride ourselves to be progressive and contemporary council. In the interest of demonstrating exemplary leadership, I have high expectations that we will be professional in our conduct during the evening and respectful of our debate. I want to be clear, I will not tolerate any form of acrimony or insult, grandstanding or yelling. Chamber is a workplace and a public space, and we have an obligation to ensure that the working environment and public forums are safe for everybody, both emotionally as well as physically. Councillors, we have a lot to get through, and I ask that tonight you direct your questions through me and comments through me as Chair, and I'll ensure that we have endeavoured that everybody has the opportunity to speak and that we shall finish on time. Before we commence, I'd like to read out a statement. On behalf of the Council, I want to make a statement in relation to the detention of refugees and people seeking asylum at the Mantra Bell. I am proud to represent this council, and I speak tonight with nothing but sadness and pain at the federal government's treatment of refugees and people seeking asylum here in Darebin. Darebin objects in its strongest possible terms to the transfer of 60 men from the Mantra Bell to an undisclosed location. The men should be freed into the community detention immediately, pending determination of their permanent status. 8 years ago, the government established camps for the refugees and asylum seekers in Nauru and Manus Island. Hundreds of people spent far too long in those camps, which are better described as prisons for little purpose. Their suffering is Australia's shame. Hundreds of these people were transferred to Australia under the now defunct Medevac legislation. They have been diagnosed with medical conditions, physical and mental, requiring treatment in Australia. When that legislation was cruelly repealed, they were transferred to hotels to be held indefinitely. One of those hotels, the Mantra Bell, is in Darebin. They could have and should have been released in the community detention then. I am ashamed that around 60 men have been imprisoned in their midst for over a year, with few, if any, visitors allowed. No outside time, no connection to family and friends. Apart from the incredible commitment and support from our local community, advocates and members, the Commonwealth has allowed no connection to the Darebin community, a community that overwhelmingly supports them and wants to welcome them to a new home. Council has asked repeatedly for them to be released, and if not, and if not, for council to be allowed to offer those men health services, including library services, sporting facilities and council programs available to all the residents to directly improve their health and wellbeing. Again and again, the federal government chose cruelty. Last week, the men were transferred again. They were not told where they were being taken or when they would be removed. And when this occurred, it was heavy-handed, disproportionated. There was a disproportionated police response. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. This cruelty serves no purpose except cruelty itself. Darebin has long called the federal government to change its policy towards refugees and asylum seekers. We will continue to do so. Regardless of the location of our neighbours, we were at the Mantra Bell. We have supported and will continue to support the agencies and volunteers working to support them directly. And I give you my word as the Mayor, and on behalf of every councillor, they will not rest until they are free. Everyone in Melbourne knows what it's like to have your movements restricted and to not be able to visit family and friends. But if this year has been tough enough on us, imagine life would have been for those who have dreamed to be able to spend even an hour outside, to visit our libraries and parks, to get to know their neighbours, to make new friends. These men seek safety and have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. They have the right to freedom. They have the right to a home. As Australia heads towards the end of the year, after this year of restrictions, the treatment of these men is a national shame. Our community stands ready to welcome these men as their new neighbours and friends. Instead, the federal government has offered them cruelty and neglect. To the residents who have worked tirelessly to support these men, I commend you. I stand with you and with my councillor colleagues who were present when the men were removed from Darebin. To the men who are at Mantra Bell, I also have a message. We hope, we believe, we know that one day soon you will be free. This council and this community stand by you now, tomorrow, and the day after. We will not forget you. We have the friends here in this chamber, and your friends are here waiting for you to be free. One day, we will meet you here in this hall. We will see your faces and hear your voices and talk about the future. We are here waiting for you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Now we move over to item 1, membership. Membership is as listed in the agenda. Item 2, I have no apologies for this evening. Whew. Item 3, disclosures of conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare? I would also, as there are no other conflicts I need to declare as the Mayor, I will be declaring a general conflict of interest for item number 9.4, as I work in the aged care sector, and these items relate to Council's roles and activity as a potential registered aged care provider. Item 4, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, could I have a motion to adopt the minutes? Thank you, Councillor. That's moved by Councillor Lawrence. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Williams. I'll put that motion.
Yeah, just before you do, can we just confirm that the correction has been made to the minutes?
Yes, it has.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Item number 5. Item number 5. Councillors, will now move into question and submission time. Due to the current COVID-19 health crisis and associated requirements, residents or interested persons have been asked to lodge their public question online with Council by 12 p.m. today. Thanks for everyone who submitted questions. The full question and responses have been circulated to all councillors. Tonight, I'll be only reading the questions and responses. These questions have been circulated for officers' responses. Question number 1 from Wendy Gates. What are you doing to make the process for obtaining a building permit through council come in line with the best practice, or at least something close to a decent process that does not cause so much stress and heartache? Recently, I have undertaken a simple ColourBond shed application. This application took 5 months to complete and around 4 months, i.e. 17 weeks, within council itself. Thank you for getting in touch, Wendy. I'm so sorry to hear about your experience with council. We've heard similar feedback from others, and that's why council has started a comprehensive service review of its building services to improve customer services. Thank you also for taking your time you spent discussing with its managers at City Development last week. The detailed feedback will be invaluable. Question 2. Maddie Mastry from Preston. What progress has been made towards finalising the Gertrude Street residents' proposal to close Gertrude Street at the western end? Thank you for your question, Maddie. Our transport staff have looked at this and other options for protecting local character of Gertrude Street and other nearby streets. We're set to consult with local community about the options in the second week of January. We are waiting until after Christmas so we don't put in extra pressure on people at this time of the year.
I'll just give the Mayor a chance to catch her breath. So the next questions are from John Nugent from Epping. On Monday the 7th of December, I gave 3 questions to the Customer Service Department. My first question was about the Dole-Donath Master Plan. My second was about 2 reports that I wanted to know the outcome. My third was about 2 new seats for number 1 Oval Donath Reserve, which was overdue by 12 months. Pardon me. When I checked the minutes of the council meeting, they were wrong. My first and third question were changed and made into 1 question, and my second question was not asked. How can I trust council officers that they will not change my questions when the meeting is closed to the general public? Thanks, Mr Nugent, for your questions. I can confirm that you did in fact ask 3 questions at the 7th of December council meeting. Question 1 related to the status of the Dole-Donath Master Plan. Question 2 related to the status of 2 new seats at Donath Reserve. Both questions were accompanied by a series of statements, opinions and supplementary questions. These statements, opinions and supplementary questions were not read out as they are contrary to council's governance rules in relation to questions from the public, which specify that a maximum of 3 questions are permitted per person with no subparts. And as you can see this evening, we're not reading out preambles to questions either. Your third question, submitted on the 7th of December, related to matters that you've been previously updated on or formally advised about. Accordingly, and in line with our governance rules, this question was disallowed. In summary, Mr Nugent, we're of the view that your questions to the 7th of December council meeting have been answered and have been dealt with appropriately. Do you want me to keep going? Yep. Question 4 is from Lachlan Jolly. My questions for tonight's meeting are in relation to the ongoing matter of the Dale Glen Park rewilding proposal. Michael, a member of our community, has taken the initiative to turn the park into a community garden and has spent months improving and working on the site. Many in the community support Michael and have been dropping off garden supplies and seedlings, as well as asking how they can get involved. The council distributed a letter warning that all garden beds would be removed so the site can be upgraded for rewilding. Question 1. This community garden would provide value in terms of cultivation of community spirit, as well as invaluable benefits of giving struggling families access to free, fresh and healthy food. In light of this, is it responsible governing for the council to shut down and stamp out grassroots community initiatives such as the Community Garden Project? Question 2, can the council agree to undertake a transparent and detailed consultation process so that we have a chance to properly put forward the case for maintaining the works that have been done so as to integrate both Michael's work and the rewilding? Question 3, can council agree not to remove the garden beds or commence work till later in the new year to give the council and the community a chance to collaborate so as to arrive at a satisfactory outcome for all? Thank you for the question, Mr Jolly. Council has well-developed plans to rewild the park as part of its program to plant trees, shrubs and grasses across the municipality and to improve the amenity and biodiversity values across our open space network. We continue to promote local existing community gardens for those looking to establish and maintain veggie gardens rather than new community gardens occupying fully accessible public open spaces which can be enjoyed by a wider range of residents. In relation to the veggie garden, this specific veggie garden, council has agreed with the resident that the veggie garden can remain in place over summer and no removal works will be undertaken until March 2021, at which point the site will be prepared for our rewilding efforts, which will be undertaken in the next planting season. We will ensure that the resident is given plenty of notice prior to the removal, and I know that the staff have been discussing this with Michael. And the final question for the evening is from Nikki Passaportis from Preston. And the question is, we would like to know what progress has been made with the application to council to close the 3 streets affected by the proposed new Bell Station car park, namely Gertrude, Adeline and Esther Streets. The application from these 3 streets was unanimous and we would like the matter to go ahead as soon as possible. Thank you for the question, Nikki. Our transport staff have looked at this and other options for protecting the local character of Gertrude, Adeline and Esther Streets and the surrounding area. And we're set to consult with the local community about options in the second week of January. After consultation, council will then consider the options together with the community feedback at a formal council meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Councillors, now we move over to item number 6, petitions. As there are no petitions this evening, we'll now move into consideration of council reports. Item number 7.1. Let's wait for the officers. Councillors, are there any questions to the officers this evening? There being no further questions or any questions at all, we will now move to debate. Councillors, I remind you that once the debate has commenced, there'll be no further questions. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Through you, Messina, I'd like to move the... I don't want to move the officer's recommendation. I'd like to move what I was circulated this morning to all councillors.
Okay. If one moment, please. Can I just confirm, Councillor Newton, that actually is your motion in full? Can I have you review that?
I might need to see further down
Yep.
the page. Yep.
If we can direct that so that Councillor Newton can see the full motion, just to ensure that it is hers, in fact, with the amendments she circulated earlier. Can we shift that down, please? You can just scroll down. Yep, thank you.
Yes, that's got the amendments.
Right. Do we have a seconder for them? Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Newton, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Messina. So what I really enjoyed about reading this report and looking at the plans for Bell and Preston stations is just how much of council's advocacy is included. So when you think about some of the things that we're talking about that we really support, so 2 MCGs worth of new open space, we're talking about a continuous park from Oakover to north of Murray Road, the linear park, etc. So much of that was through council's advocacy work, which I'm very, very proud of and very proud to see how much that has been included. But as you can see in point 2, We don't think that the current plans go far enough to meet the community need, and that is particularly around the Bell Station Commuter Car Park, where we saw through the council election time and before that too, that the Bell Residents Group is very strong in their position to have the commuter car park located at the west of the rail line, and the council officers and ourselves have really agreed with them on that. And I might also just speak specifically to the extra parts that I put through that weren't in the original motion. So this is particularly to do with a meeting that Councillor Messina, or Mayor Messina, and I had with a group called the Central Preston Trackside Group. So these guys are just north of Murray Road, along William Street, Clinch Avenue, up to Regent. And there's a few things, you know, them being part of the Preston Central Precinct, there's a few things that they would really like to see that I'm really glad that we can help advocate for. So that is including at Clinch Avenue to make sure that the car park is improved so that there's a green street, so that they don't get any lost there. They want to make sure a lot of the residents there, their driveways are at the back, so just facing the railway lines. They want to make sure that they can have access to get out during and after construction. We want to make sure that people can cross safely at Murray Road. That's a really big concern for this group. And we also want to write to the Level Crossing River project and make sure that the corridor between Murray Road and Regent Street isn't forgotten. So this is really important to that group, that community, and I really hope that councillors can support it.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Newton, for taking the initiative to propose the additional points that councillors can see there, which I think really both strengthen the motion that was put well together by our officers, but also build upon some of the local advocacy, which I think is so important, that council is well aligned with residents who are really not only on the front lines of trying to get the best outcome here, but literally will be living with the outcomes here for decades to come. So it is absolutely essential that we hear residents' voices, that we're responsive to that, and that we stand shoulder and shoulder on good, sound planning when it comes to this particular project. I'm really pleased to see in our advocacy, not only put through by Councillor Newton, but also by our officers, a really strong emphasis on some of those key elements that I know are dear to the community, and I wanted to particularly emphasise the proposal to include a space as part of the Level Crossing project, open space area that actually speaks to the industrial and multicultural history of the corridor. As some councillors would be aware, and we have proposed here, a space that would specifically speak to the fact that railway workers would come together after work and play Trugo and play bocce, and in fact connect and use that space. And in fact, that space is still there, and that is so dear to the history, but also can be part of the future. And of course also the advocacy for social enterprise to be included. It is absolutely essential that this project delivers significant social, environmental and economic benefit to our community. Our community will be putting up with a huge amount of disruption. It is an important state project, but it can also be a significant local project in terms of investment in job creation and opportunities for our community. And finally, I just want to emphasise the value and the importance of the green open spaces that are included, the rewilding components, the Indigenous garden components, and really delivering environmental benefit. That's what our advocacy should be calling for, and it certainly does with this motion.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillors, as there are no further debate, I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. I just want to acknowledge, take a moment to acknowledge the advocacy and the creativity of the Bell Residents Group and the Central Preston Trackside Group, the officers and my colleagues for this particular project is an intergenerational project that will stand there for long before our lifetime. So I want to just acknowledge the strong advocacy work and the commitment and the passion of those two groups, the officers and the councillors. Thank you. The next item we have, the next report we have on this item to consider this evening is item 7.2. Councillors, are there any questions to the officers? Councillors, do I have a motion? Would you like to, sorry.
I would like to move that motion. I'd like to move a motion. Yep.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? We need to insert the names too. So, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Greco, would you like to add your additions to the motion, please?
Yes.
As per the items in the confidential report.
Yes, Mayor Messina, I'd like to move this a motion which appears before you.
Just one moment. Is the seconder agree? No, we've got a seconder. Is the seconder, which is Councillor Lawrence, agreeable to the additions?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're moving the motion with the officers, with some changes to the officer's recommendation. So, Councillor Lawrence, have you familiarised yourself with those additions? Okay. Do we have them all on the wall, on the teleprompter on the wall there? Can we scroll them down, please? I'll just get Councillor Greco to confirm those changes. Councillor Greco, is that your
Thank
the
you,
motion you're moving?
Mayor Messina. I hope councillors have had a chance to have a look at the changes which have been circulated in regards to this particular item. This is in relation to both the Darebin Arts and Heritage Advisory Panel and also the Darebin Council Awards Advisory Committee. These committees, or the panels and committees, are very important bodies that help council in its deliberations. One is in relation to the Darebin Homestead, and the other one is in relation to the Australia Awards that are given, the awards that are given to the community and that are presided over by both councillors and also community members. As you can see, councillors, the officers have worked diligently to come up with a list of names, particularly in relation to the first committee up there, which is the advisory committee. There's a list of names there that have been put. That's in regards to the awards that are given out annually. And what we see there is that, and there's been an inclusion of the Multicultural Arts Victoria as a member of the Darebin Arts and Heritage Advisory Panel. And just in relation to that, councillors, I've spoken to Multicultural Arts Victoria just to sound them out whether they would be interested in being part of this panel. And they were certainly delighted if they were given the opportunity to be part of this. So I'm hoping that councillors would accept that. And in relation to the Darebin Community Advisory Awards, you could see the list of names there. And also there's been a slight change from what was originally recommended by our officers, in including some specific awards, if you like, for Cold Emerging Community Leaders of the Year, so under 21, and also to acknowledge the work and commitment of other community leaders of the year from the Cold community. So it's very much what we've had in the report, but just with a few changes in order to make it much more relevant and also to pick up on the various contributions that could be had in regards to making these committees much more representative of the community. These committees will meet regularly during the year, and the awards committee will meet only a couple of times in order to come up with the various awards that we've nominated there. But in relation to the Darebin Arts and Heritage Advisory Board, that will meet on a much more regular basis. It's a high-powered panel, and I believe with the inclusion of a representative of MAV, the Multicultural Arts Victoria, it will even make it more representative and also an even stronger panel, given the expertise and the recognised expertise across the state of Victoria of MAV, the Multicultural Arts Victoria. The other thing I'd like to say about Multicultural Arts Victoria, they are a Darebin-based organisation. They actually have their head office in Darebin. We're able to lure them to come to Darebin. So this is a way that they can make a contribution back to our city in the form of providing assistance on that panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
No, it's councillor Lawrence moved it.
Oh, is it?
Seconded,
Oh,
sorry.
No, that's okay.
You can reserve your comment later.
Thank you.
I'll reserve my right to speak.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
I'd just like to propose a small amendment, and it's to point 8, so section 2.8 of the motion. I've circulated the words of the amendment to councillors and to our officers, and it's simply to, after where it says nominee, to then have a comma and to say to be determined by the CEO, and then to full stop. And I can explain why, Mayor, if that...
Is that a... Do we have... Councillor Newton will... Can we... Yeah, do we get
so they've
the...
been sent to officers, but it would be to be determined by CEO, and that's simply because if DEC can't provide someone who determines which multicultural organisation is actually going to submit a nominee, we're sort of, from a governance point of view, we're in a difficult situation there, so someone needs to make that call.
So it reads in the first instance DEC and then further the nominee. If DEC isn't unable to, the nominee will be determined by the CEO.
No, sorry, Mayor, it would read representative from the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council in the first instance, or another multicultural organisation if DEC is unable to provide a nominee, comma, to be determined by the CEO. Reason being is that who determines who the multicultural organisation is? We have so many wonderful organisations, someone needs to make that call. So, which would, I'm assuming, would be on advice of the officers.
Is that agreeable to the mover and the...
I'm happy to accept that as an amendment.
Happy to accept that.
Great, thank you. That is now the sustained motion. Do we have a... She's eager. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Demetriadis, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd like to make an amendment to Councillor McCarthy's amendment. Is this the right time?
An amendment. It's a further amendment.
Further amendment. Have you circulated that, or do you just want to...
I just want to add a couple of words into that sentence, if that's possible.
Yes, you can, yes.
Oh, thank you. So currently that reads that the whole sentence is going to be determined by the CEO, who the representative of DEC is in the first instance. So I believe, more in line with what Councillor McCarthy was implying, we could maybe put, instead of the comma, after where it says, or another multicultural organisation if DEC is unable to provide a nominee, which is to be determined by the CEO. So that last bit is to be determined by the CEO.
Is that acceptable to the mover?
You see the words?
Sure.
Thank you.
No. Just one moment while we put that on the screen.
Sorry, Governance, can I just get those words on the screen, please? Just if we could add which is to be determined. To be determined. Is that right, or which is determined?
One moment, Councillor McCarthy, one at a time.
I think I was just trying to make, just to make it more clear that it's the multicultural organisation that the CEO is able to determine. So,
Mayor, if
you have an
I can,
idea, Councillor
simply,
McCarthy?
I think Councillor Demetriadis and I are trying to solve the same problem, which is simply to put brackets around or and CEO, and
oh yes.
it brings it as a subset.
Okay. Did we hear that?
To insert a bracket before the word or and a bracket after CEO.
It's the last council meeting of the year. So am I understanding that we're putting an open bracket over the word or and then a closed bracket at the end of CEO? Is that correct? Okay. So we need to just go to the end of the word where it says CEO, closed bracket, and that makes it correct. Is that correct, Councillor Demetriadis? We need to
Thank you,
then
Mayor.
remove the last line, representative, and then item number 9.
Yep.
Okay. Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
Mayor, for sake of clarity, could we read it out so that
Sure, that
we're actually
says-
sure what we're saying?
Representative from the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council in the first instance, open bracket, or another multicultural organisation if DEC is unable to provide a nominee, which is to be determined by the CEO, close bracket.
Happy to accept that.
Is that acceptable to the seconder?
Yes, happy to accept it.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers? Okay, so you're reserving your right? Okay, so Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I'd like to suggest another amendment, which is to the same point, and it would be to remove the words "in the first instance" and to remove the words "if DEC is unable to provide a nominee." In fact, it would be to return to representative from the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council or another multicultural organisation.
Can I just ask that you repeat that, please, Councillor Rennie?
Yes, that point would read representative from the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council or another multicultural organisation.
We'll just wait a moment while we get it all up on the screen. Is that acceptable to the mover and to the seconder?
We're still not there. It's not on the
Oh, we're
screen.
not there?
No, it's a much
Okay.
smaller thing. It would read only, and only these words, representative from the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council or another multicultural organisation. Full stop.
It's full stop, so.
Okay.
We'll just wait for that to be removed, the last line. That's just, yeah, okay. Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
Mayor Messina, that's not acceptable.
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Would you like to speak to the motion, to the new amendment?
Who's the seconder? Susan.
Susan Newton, Councillor
Okay,
Newton?
thank you.
Yeah.
I would thank you. I think we're all in agreement that it would be a valuable thing to have another member from multicultural communities on this committee. But I think it's also important to understand that there's quite a rigorous process that goes to the appointment of people onto these committees, and that the other members have all put in an expression of interest which has outlined their skills and the knowledge they bring or the professional experience they bring to this committee, and they've been assessed based on that expression of interest and the skills and knowledge and experience that they will bring to the committee, and that's a competitive assessment process. I think it would be fair and reasonable, in fact I think our community would expect that for such an important position that there would be a similar rigorous selection process which would involve people putting in an expression of interest, outlining their skills and experience that they would bring to this, and then the outcome being determined based on the skills and experience that they would bring to the role. It is an important role. These people will spend a number of meetings with our mayor discussing applications for significant awards in our community that come with great gravitas and great importance. And it's very important that the people who are participating in those discussions have some skill and experience, whether by virtue of their professional background or by virtue of their cultural background, their heritage, but they actually are able to articulate and outline that value they will add to this committee. And I believe that is absolutely fundamental and critical to the confidence we can have in the selections that they make. In order to achieve that, we need more than one expression of interest to be submitted. And by inviting various multicultural organisations to nominate or submit names, or encourage people to put forth an expression of interest, we increase the availability of this opportunity to more people, we increase the knowledge of the awards and the possibilities out there, and in fact we are likely to get a more diverse pool of people applying, and I think that's fundamentally what we're interested in, is the diversity of the group of people who make up this. So by in fact changing the words as I have suggested, we could have hundreds of people be aware of the opportunity to put their name forward for this committee, all of whom would be from multicultural communities, which is what we are seeking to achieve, and we would then be in a position to draw on that skill, that depth of experience, people from newly emerging communities, and that would enable, for example, us to extend the opportunity to the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre to put a name forward and to nominate someone, for example, and that then they would be selected based on merit, which I think is the way council goes about these processes and is something that we should hold very close in terms of the esteem that we wish this to be held in.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. So similar to Councillor Rennie, one of the things that's proposed as a new award with Councillor Greco's motion is that we have a COLD Emerging Community Leader of the Year under 21 years, and we also have COLD Elder Community Leader of the Year. I'm supportive of that, and I think it extends on from a few years ago when we initially moved these awards from an Australia Day award on the 26th of January to become the Darebin Community Awards. So I do commend Councillor Greco for bringing in those new awards. But for me, what that means is when we're talking about that other addition, which is to Councillor Rennie's amendment, a representative from the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council or another multicultural organisation, I think that we want to cast our net wide for that so that we can have the best opportunity of making sure that we have someone on that committee who is really well placed to particularly help us with, you know, selecting a COLD Emerging Community Leader of the Year or a COLD Elder Community Leader of the Year, as well as all the other awards. So for me, I think we have a range of really incredible multicultural organisations in Darebin. We're a very diverse community, and I think, to me, casting that net wider, making sure that it's merit-based and that we have more than one application is a really good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I'll be speaking against the amendment. And the reason why I'll be speaking against the amendment is that I think we owe it to the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council for it to be considered first. And then in the event that the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council cannot submit a representative or nominate somebody to represent DEC, that then it goes out to the wider community. Why is that? DEC is an organisation that represents over 50 groups and organisations within the city of Darebin. And DEC is an organisation which has a particular focus to Darebin. And there's, from my knowledge and being involved in the multicultural sector, there's no other organisation that has a specific focus to Darebin from a multicultural perspective. And so I think it's important, that those points are very important in acknowledging the role that DEC plays with Council as an advisory committee of Council or as a quasi-advisory committee, of Council. So I think we owe it to DEC. It will almost equate to saying we would have members of the Darebin Aboriginal Advisory Committee or other Aboriginal groups. I think it would be quite offensive if we were to put something of that nature and say that, oh, we're considering DAC and maybe considering other Aboriginal groups. Why do we consider DAC? And rightly so, because DAC has a Darebin focus. The very name is a Darebin Aboriginal Advisory Committee. The same is with the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council. So I think given that and given its contribution, I think it's been on the committee or had representatives on the committee, either direct members of DEC or representatives that DEC has nominated for the last 2 decades. And I think we should continue that.
Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor, like to speak against the amendment. It's actually a great strength of the City of Darebin that we've had a Darebin Ethnic Communities Council. Obviously there's a Victorian Ethnic Communities Council, there's also national bodies, but we've always had one here. That hasn't been the pattern in all councils. May I say some more white bread councils hadn't had that kind of structure in their community. And I would like to, well, I think it's important that we continue to engage with DEC. I suppose it's somewhat like apartheid South Africa, where the ANC was elected and had the body of the people, but the government there instead chose to deal with different tribal groups and decided who speaks for these people. DEC represents many different groups in the city. It's not something I always agree with everything they say, but they're a structure, just like the ACTU or like a Chamber of Commerce. And if we downgrade them, and in this case it's sort of, it's slightly hidden, but it's basically that we downgrade them as the actual structure that we integrate with and communicate with in terms of all the other that make up DEC. So I think it's important that we make them the first port of call because they're a voice of a great amount of migrants.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Do we have any further speakers? As there's no further debate, I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That I declare that motion lost. Now we move back to the substantive motion.
The speakers you've heard from.
We've heard from Councillor
You've
Greco.
You've heard from Councillor Newton and Councillor McCarthy.
Yep. Are there any further speakers?
Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Rennie.
Sorry, I haven't spoken.
Yeah,
You haven't spoken?
yeah, go.
Are there any further speakers? Can we just ensure that we have the right motion on the screen, please? Is that was not the right?
Yeah, it's coming.
The one in brackets? It was the one in brackets.
Yeah, it's.
One moment. That's correct. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. If this motion is successful, we will now have 9 categories in relation to the Darebin Community Awards, and I'm completely comfortable and fine with that. I think that's terrific. It does reflect the broad, to some extent, the broad range of community involvement and achievement and contribution that this city sees. And what is striking, Mayor and councillors, which I think we need to give some thought to, is how we make the Darebin Community Awards, as they are, relevant to the times in which we live. And so the notion of recognising both elders and emerging community leaders in both the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander category and also the COLD category are terrific. I think we need to also recognise that it's actually incumbent upon the organisation and councillors and the community generally to make sure that we see the broad range of nominations for these categories, particularly given the extraordinary work that our community's done during COVID to hold together. There are volunteers who work tirelessly that go without recognition for years, and thankfully we tend to find hopefully recognition for them. But we've also seen people in the past 12 months do extraordinary things in this city, in their local neighbourhoods. And so I suppose I'm just, in speaking in favour of the motion in general, appealing to councillors, to community, to really make sure that we get those quiet achievers to the fore and make sure that they are nominated, that their voices are heard. Because if we just look at who were the Darebin Community Citizens of the Year, in the past. We have people like Miranda Sharp, people like Emily Hughes, terrific local people doing incredible work, transforming parts of this city in some cases. But we also have some real quiet achievers as well. And I think it's incumbent upon us to get the word out. So support the motion. Great to see the cold inclusion as well. But let's make sure that we get the word out there as widely as we can.
Councillors, are there any further speakers? Is there... Councillor Rennie?
Thank you. Regretfully, I'm going to speak against this motion. Whilst there are a great number of people who have been nominated and who have extraordinary skills and abilities and will add an enormous amount to the process of these committees, I am not convinced that we are doing our community a service by allowing people through nepotism and connection with groups to gain access to committees like this where they are making such fundamental and important decisions for our community. I've been on this committee and I've seen and understood the value that people can contribute, but also I've seen that when people are appointed without a recruitment process, they tend to contribute less, understand less of the process, and I think that falls short of what our community should expect. So I'm disappointed that my amendment was not accepted, and without a merit-based process for the recruitment to people on committees such as this, I do not believe they pass the sniff test, and I believe our community deserves better. Our community and the integrity of these awards is based on the idea that people who are on the panel to select the recipients of these awards have been selected on merit. And we have failed in that respect by handing out appointments to organisations with which we wish to curry favour. And we had an opportunity to say that it should be merit-based and to broaden the opportunity to more groups, in particular more young people. It was a real lack in the committee last time that there weren't enough young people, and I was about the youngest person on a committee determining who should be the Young Citizen of the Year, which I felt was really problematic. We haven't provided the broader opportunity. I think our community is poorer for it, and for that reason I regretfully will be voting against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Mayor Messina, just briefly. Yes, I'd echo comments by Councillor McCarthy that we really need to encourage people across the community to nominate. Having that breadth of nominations is really important, and obviously we've been all through an extraordinary year, so there's no doubt there's many stories and many community heroes that are out there to come. I would just reflect on the overall nominations and selections of people. Obviously, as councillors, we weren't involved in that. That was done through a process. And I would note it's good that the 9 categories we have really reflect the social inclusion and reflect the diversity of our community. But I also notice the names of many people that were nominated in this process also reflects diversity and social inclusion of this community. So I've got full confidence in the committee that's being appointed tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further speakers, councillors? Councillor Dimitriadis.
Thank you, Mayor. I rise to second Councillor Gaetano's motion, Greco, sorry. Darebin is one of Victoria's most multicultural and culturally linguistically diverse communities. Where our multicultural nature should be celebrated, and that is why I support Councillor Greco's amendment to add 2 new categories to the Darebin Community Awards, one for CALD emerging community leaders under 21 years of age, and one for the elder, community leaders. These changes will allow Darebin to continue to celebrate our First Nations leaders, Citizens of the Year and other awards, as well as acknowledge the important and continued contribution to our CALD communities. I also fully support the inclusion of a spot on the Darebin Art and Heritage Advisory Panel. for a representative from Multicultural, is that part of the, yeah,
Please.
from the Multicultural Arts Victoria, and this is to ensure that the multicultural and CALD communities are considered in the important work this advisory panel does for Darebin. Multicultural Arts Victoria is not only based in Darebin, but situated in Northcote, and they also hold strongly their respect for our First Nations people. MAV work to make art in response to the forces of bigotry and intolerance and understand who they are as migrants on Indigenous land. They envisage many of their qualities that Darebin Council considers important, and they have experience with a wide and diverse array of organisations, so that I believe they'll be a great addition to the panel. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dimitriadis. Are there any further speakers? Councillors, there's no further debate. I'll put that item to the vote.
Right of reply.
No, you don't have one, Councillor. Because it's been amendment, Councillor Greco, sorry. Sorry, councillors, there's no further debate. I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That item is declared one. I declared that motion carried, I beg your pardon. Councillors, the next report we have to consider is item 7.3. Councillors, there is an amendment to the officer's recommendation, and I'll ask Ms Craven to speak to that amendment. The amendment's basically, as per the scheduled details of dates, to read Tuesday the 9th of March, not Monday the 8th of March, which is in fact Labor Day and International Women's Day.
Thank you very much. Through the Mayor. Yeah, we just would like to offer an alternative councillor recommendation where we will adjust the table in the report to reflect the 9th of March rather than the 8th of March for the Planning Committee meeting.
Thank you, Ms Craven. Councillors, do we have any questions of the officers? As there are no questions, do I have a motion, councillors? Moved by Councillor Lawrence, second by Councillor Williams. Councillor Lawrence.
I've got nothing to say. It's all basic in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Williams.
This is a very straightforward process where we actually account for what dates in advance for the following year to allow not only ourselves where we're going to be for the upcoming year, but also for our residents who like to attend or be part of council when they come to, hopefully in the future, they will be able to attend instead of being online, that they could come here personally.
Councillors, do we have any further speakers? I just want to note before we put that to the vote that we will be taking the council to a place yet to be determined venue in Reservoir and Northcote, which is something that we're looking at progressing and taking this council out to the community. Councillors, as there's no further debate, I'd like to put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next report we have to consider this evening is item number 7.4, the provision of graffiti removal service. Can I just acknowledge the two officers in the chamber this evening, Mr Moore and Mr Grambo. Thank you for gracing us with your presence this evening, because I believe it's been a while since you've been in here. Councillors, do we have any questions of the officers? Councillor McCarthy, do you have a question to the officers?
I do. Thanks. Sorry, Mayor, I was just waiting for the call. Just a question in relation to the report which outlines the scope of the service and refers specifically to that under the service the provision is available for the removal of graffiti from private properties. I just note in relation to significant private properties that are held obviously by commercial and other interests, and I note in particular a site in my own ward being the Windsor Smith building, which is a site tipped for development, is absolutely covered in graffiti and has been for some time. Council has previously paid for it to be cleaned up. Would this contract enable Council to exercise either influence in relation to that? And would the provisions of this contract enable council to step in and clean up that site in the interests of the urban amenity?
To the officers.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Through the Mayor, Messina. You're quite correct. We have cleaned that site up many times. We are looking through the provisions of the local law to see what else, other aspects we can look at that. This is unsightly property, and I think we should be looking at other avenues. That costs us quite a significant amount to clean up, and I think we should be looking at other avenues to look at that for future prospects.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. McCarthy, Councillor McCarthy, do you have another question?
Thank you, and thank you to Mr. Moore for his response. Just a supplementary to that, if council was in a provision to exercise the sort of influence that I alluded to see that site cleaned up, could council then recoup the costs from that clean-up from the owner of that and other buildings?
Officers?
Just carry on. Thank you for the question. That's something we'd have to explore. That's something I cannot answer at this precise moment, but that's something we'll have to explore at a later date.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. My question relates to details from the confidential paper in relation to the tenders. Can I ask that now, or do we need to...
Depends on what the question is.
It's some of the relative merits of the tenderers.
Just one moment. Do you mean the rating scale, perhaps? Is that what you're referring to?
I want to ask for some specifics about the application, the tenders that were put in. At the close of the meeting.
Which is a procurement process.
Yep.
Sorry. Through you, Mayor Messina. It would be tricky, councillors, for us to discuss in an open council some of the confidential elements. It might be open to the council to close the meeting at the end, to close the meeting, raise the questions, open the meeting again. That would be a safer way to raise your questions, councillor.
Could I move a motion that we defer this item to the end so that questions can be asked in confidential?
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? That motion is carried, so we will defer this motion until the end of the meeting. Councillors, the next report we have to consider is item 7.5, Audit and Risk Committee report. Councillors, do I have any questions to the officers? Officer. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Rennie?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. So this is a matter that comes periodically before council to note the report from the Audit and Risk Committee. And the Audit and Risk Committee is one of our very important committees that comprises of 3 external members and 2 councillors. And I have had the privilege of being on the Audit and Risk Committee for, I think, possibly 3 of the last 4 years. And so I've seen firsthand the way in which this committee operates and the diligence with which they consider various aspects of council operations. I really commend this report to everyone and hope that people will take the time to read it and in particular to have a look at the minutes, because the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meetings give you a really good sense of what this committee discusses and the detail that they go into. But in particular, this committee talks about risks across the whole organisation, and some of those are financial risks, some are occupational health and safety risks, some are probity risks, and those are very important because we need to make sure that due diligence is occurring at every level of the organisation. The committee looks carefully over the financials, and I think everyone, and particularly our community, would know that it's very reassuring that highly skilled and qualified people who have been recruited and selected for the skills and qualifications bring an external eye to looking at the organisation's financial affairs and making sure that they are confident that everything is on track, but also with matters like probity around big tenders and contracts, and that those matters are also diligently considered. So this is a report of the work that the committee has been undertaking in the last year, and of course this committee, as with all others, had to pivot very rapidly to an online environment, which did mean that we had quite lengthy meetings which sometimes go for a number of hours with reports that run into the hundreds of pages. All of that continued online, and I'm confident that the committee has carried out its work very well.
That's time. Sorry, apologies, Councillor Rennie. The clock moved out. Sorry, apologies for that. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion? Can I have the before you speak? Can I have the clock on the screen, please? It's here. Thank you, Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina. I'm just speaking to this report. It gives quite a few details which are in the public realm, where the community can see the wide range of reports and actions that are taken by the Audit Committee. Some of those are in relation to external matters that are arisen. Others are about internal controls. And of course, when you've got a council with 1,300 staff and a large budget and 1.5 billion in assets, then the Audit Committee is a very, very busy committee. It has a huge amount of work to do. I've served on it before. And it's important, and it looks very complex, but it's important that we have such a rigorous audit of all our activities in this council.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I was really pleased, and I think Councillor Rennie made the point in her opening remarks about the minutes of these meetings. Really pleased to see that the Audit and Risk Committee is looking at our social and sustainable procurement policy and is interested in how that is applied in the organisation. It's important because when we adopt a policy of that nature, it's not only in this chamber where it needs to be obviously pursued and prosecuted through the contracts and tenders that we undertake, but it's also through that process, that forensic process of looking very closely at whether we are actually working towards achieving the outcomes that we seek to achieve, and that keeps us all accountable, and it's absolutely essential. One thing that I would note though, Mayor, and it hasn't appeared in the minutes, and I'd be interested to know in future if this does become part of the Audit and Risk Committee work, is in fact now that the Local Government Act refers specifically to the identification and promotion of climate risk and the organisation's ability to identify and respond to those climate risks, whether this starts to become one of the things that audit committees start to look at. We are in new territory, we do have a new act, and this is uncharted waters, but I can tell you on the Northern Alliance for Greenhouse Action Board, of which I'm very pleased to be on their executive, this is a hot topic, the risk environment for councils and who actually has responsibility for identifying climate risk, not just at the operational sense, but also in terms of the prevention of risk and mitigation of risk within organisations such as ours. So I commend the Audit and Risk Committee for their work, and it's pleased to see the breadth of work that they are doing, but I would I suppose, propose that at some stage in the future we need to have a look at whether our Audit and Risk Committee needs to have a specific look at whether we are compliant in relation to our climate risk obligations under the new Act. It's exciting territory, it's important territory, and we need to get it right.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Yes, I'd just like to make a few comments in relation to this particular item. I acknowledge what has been said by previous councillors in relation to the valuable work that the Audit Committee make, particularly the external Audit Committee members, and in regards to their audit expertise and their review of our operations and in very detailed account in relation to how council is travelling in regards to our operations, etc. But if I may make a comment, and the officers may want to take this up, or the committee members, the council committee members that are on the Audit Committee may want to take this up. When I look at the appendix in relation to the summary of audit committee matters that have been dealt with. The summaries are very, very general, and they don't provide enough specifics about really in terms of how council is travelling in relation to the various items. I acknowledge and respect that there's a lot of confidentiality associated with many of the items that the audit committee deals with, but if you look at some of the recommendations or the motions that have been carried, it doesn't really give any indication both to councillors or to the general community in regards to those particular items. It's a very fine balance. I appreciate that. It's a very fine balance, but given that the audit committee is an externally externally appointed, and they're appointed there to oversee the operations of council, and I think it would be good if we can find some sort of way that
10 seconds.
like more comprehensive reporting or a little bit more detailed reporting can be made in regards to the various risk and audit matters that the audit committee deal with, so that the public actually see what the thinking and what the assessment of the audit committee actually is.
Councillor Greco, are there any further speakers? As there's no further debate, can I put that item to the vote? All those in favour? That item is carried. Councillors, item 8, consideration and response to petitions and notices of motions. Before we discuss consideration of notices motions, there's no further responses in terms of petitions, and I'm going to put that over to to the CEO. We're going to take a break, a 5-minute break, and then reconvene. 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
So, through you, Mayor Messina, so just returning back to the item that you deferred, that Council just deferred regarding the graffiti contract, perhaps if I could suggest that the way to proceed from a governance perspective would be to call for a motion that the meeting be closed for 10 minutes and then ask that, so you need a mover and a seconder for that?
Can we have a mover for the Councillor McCarthy and seconded by Councillor Williams? All those in favour? That motion is carried. I now hereby declare the meeting closed for 10 minutes.
And if
we will
have the
reconvene.
recording off, we can have the recording off.
We could close the recording,
Yep.
stop the recording, and we shall reconvene at about minute.
Oh, hang on.
Had a minute.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. We're back to the meeting. What we have in front of us next, councillors, is we're reconsidering item number 7.4, provision of graffiti removal services. Do we have any questions to the officers? Do I have a motion? Councillor McCarthy, moved by Councillor McCarthy. Would you like to state your motion?
Thanks, Mayor. So I'd like to move the motion with an additional point, which is point 3, that's been provided to officers and circulated to councillors.
Councillors, before I seek a second, I will wait for that motion to be on the screen.
And also just to note the proposed successful tenderer, which would be the graffiti eaters. So that would be listed in the recommendation there. Urban Maintenance Services, Summerhill Services, CalCorp Services and Clean It, to a total contract value of $1,619,234 GST inclusive over 5 years.
We'll wait for the wording, and then we'll wait before you speak to that. I'll ask for a seconder, and then we start the time clock when you're... I'll just wait for that to be up there, Councillor Williams, and then you can perhaps... Councillor McCarthy, can I confirm that is your notice of motions without the inclusion of the figures and the total and who the services contract is going to?
No, sorry, Mayor. So an update was sent through just earlier, which would add the additional words after the bracket closed, and it would say, and progress toward a graffiti tag register. So that should be added after the bracket, and progress toward a graffiti tag register.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I just ask council business to add in the contract sums and the contractors' names as Councillor McCarthy's just moved for the benefit of the chamber? Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, are you happy to second that motion?
Yes, I am.
Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you also for officers for getting up the additional point, and thank you to Councillor Williams for seconding it. As councillors would have seen from the report, this is really to appoint the companies that would be undertaking what is important work. It's not the most glamorous work, but it is important work for this city, not just on public assets such as those owned by council, but also from time to time on private assets as well. And that really goes to the point 3, which is that we have a scourge of graffiti in some parts of our city, particular sites which council in the past has in fact cleaned up at council's expense and at other times at private expense. In my own ward, one of those is the Windsor Smith site that has sat as a pretty much a vacant property, occasionally occupied for many years, and continues not to be developed, continues not to have activity other than being covered in an array of graffiti tags. It's not the attractive stuff that we like to see, the beautiful murals, images of native flora and fauna, but in fact just a complete mess. And to be frank, the residents in my ward and in the surrounding neighbourhood are fed up. So to go to the point 3, really, it's to appeal to exercise whatever powers we have to see that clean-up of such sites, either at the cost of the property owner or by council undertaking that work and recouping that cost, but it has to change. Apart from that, I do support the recommendation, the rigorous process that the organisation undertakes and the work that our officers have undertaken to get us to this point. This proposed contract procurement process, as councillors would be aware, does in fact respond to not just the, I suppose, the direct work that the organisation needs to have in response to its own assets, as mentioned earlier, but also other assets from time to time. And of course, we do know that council has been very proactive in providing alternatives where possible, when a site is continuously graffitied or tagged, to actually work with the property owners and support artistic processes as well, and that can sometimes provide a remedy in the long term. So I support the recommendation, and thank you to Councillor Williams for seconding this, and also just to say that in relation to the graffiti tag register, it would be good to see where we are in relation to that. Obviously, we know that there are a whole range of reasons why people write on walls and other assets. Some of them are through a whole range of sort of rebellion and other issues, but some of them are just because it's there, and we need to actually provide the sort of response that our community expects.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Wow, there's not much to add to my fellow councillor Trent McCarthy. However, I'll just add a couple of things that going back many years ago that we both increased the amount of money in the budget to ensure that we continue attacking graffiti in the area, because graffiti is a horrible thing to happen. It's even more so horrible when it happens on your own property. The problem is that graffiti is increasing. There's no discrimination in reference to where you live, what suburb you live, or how wealthy that you are. I think it's important to realise that it actually, not only Darebin Council is pumping a lot of money in removing as much graffiti as possible, but it affects actually every single municipality in the area. I guess there's not a lot to say except for, as my fellow councillors already mentioned, that graffiti is something that we need to keep tackling, because the more we keep at it and removing that graffiti, Hopefully they will find some other place, some other area that they would tag, and hopefully they won't come back. But once graffiti sees that there's art, or they consider it as art, or they're tagging, they continue to expand in that area and around it. So it's important that we keep it clean as much as possible, keep very vigilant, and keep removing those the graffiti as much as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Do we have any further speakers? Councillors, as there's no further debate, I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? That item is, I declare that motion carried. Councillors, now we move over to item number 9, notices of motion. Item number 9.1, rate relief to residents' business financially affected by COVID-19 restrictions.
Thank you, Mayor. I've changed some of the wording that was published in the report, the agenda, sorry. So I've got a new, slightly amended nom for the rate relief.
Okay, just one moment. Is that your notice of motion that you circulated earlier, Councillor Dimitriadis?
That's correct.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Dimitriadis? Councillor Greco. Councillor Dimitriadis, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure. Did you need me to read it out?
No, you don't have
okay,
to.
great. Thanks. Sure. So this year has been a difficult year for many residents and local businesses. The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted and impacted our lives in unprecedented ways. Many Darebin residents, families, pensioners and businesses are experiencing financial hardship as we cope with the full impact of COVID-19. The effects can be felt and seen throughout our community. Last week, I visited Span Community House in Thornbury, where volunteers are giving free clothing to those in need. I met struggling families and people who have unexpectedly lost their jobs during the pandemic, agonising to make ends meet. Similarly, walking down our local shopping strip these days, the effects of COVID on businesses are also obvious, with so many vacant shops and buildings in such a small area. Now is a time for us as a council to reduce the financial burden on struggling businesses and residents. Whilst I acknowledge the Council has put in place a COVID-19 support package for residents and businesses, including a deferral arrangement for rate instalments and various hardship grants, which have only been available to a limited number of community members, there are still some businesses and many workers who continue to struggle or will struggle to meet their repayments, particularly when job seeker and job keeper benefits cease to exist. The intent of this motion is for Council to receive a report on options to provide either a rate rebate or a partial rate waiver for struggling residents and businesses due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This will allow all our community members who are facing financial hardship, not just those who have been awarded a hardship grant, with some relief and reassurance that we care. Just across Darebin Creek, Banyule Council has offered up to a $500 rate waiver to eligible people impacted by COVID-19. Yet here in Darebin, our rates were increased, despite us being in a recession, a state of emergency and a state of disaster. We must not be leaving behind people who are struggling. As we find ourselves in recession recovery, as well as increased unemployment rates, with many people unable to pay their bills, we should not be creating a larger mountain of debt for residents or local businesses. If there is ever a time that Council could help residents and businesses that are struggling to make ends meet, now is that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dimitriadis. Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd like to reserve my right to speak, Mayor Messina.
Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina. Yes, it's been a very difficult year, as we know. Some people were able to maintain full-time employment, and some businesses boomed, obviously large supermarket chains, but many were actually put out of business completely in terms of hospitality, arts, entertainment, a lot of the key industries for this area. And those people have gone 8-9 months without any income, and now they're just starting to tick over. So I welcome this motion to get back a report that will show, some options like rebates or waivers, so that we can sort of see what's possible and going forward. And obviously, we've JobKeeper affects tens of thousands of people in the city of Darebin, and it goes down to $2,000 January, and then in March it stops completely. So a lot of the buffer that was providing a buffer in small business and hospitality and many little businesses in the city will actually disappear. So I'm just concerned we may even have another mini recession around March. But yeah, I'd look forward to a report about these different options.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
I'd just like to, this is the first time I've seen the additional point B. I'd like to just propose 3 words to be included if I can, and it would simply be where it says financial hardship provisions and support for residents, to insert community organisations and businesses. So to insert the reference to community organisations.
One moment. So my understanding is to support residents and community organisations, residents, community organisations and businesses. Is that correct, Councillor McCarthy? Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder? Councillor Dimitriadis and Councillor Greco?
Yes.
Councillor Greco?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to support this because of the inclusion of point B. I'm curious as to what will come back to us in relation to A should this motion be successful. Because one of the challenges that any council has, and I know Banyule has this, as do other councils that sought to go down the rate rebate or rate waiver path, is that effectively reducing their income into the organisation resulted in them not having the money to actually spend on the support to the most vulnerable. And as a council, I'd like to think that we understand to the fullest extent who are the most vulnerable in our community. One group who have become more vulnerable, in fact, due to COVID, are those people in unsafe, unsustainable and insecure accommodation arrangements, not just renters, but also people who are reliant upon supported living arrangements. Those same people also are heavily dependent upon community service organisations that have been incredibly hard hit by COVID. One of the factors, which I don't think anyone anticipated, was the fact that we had a massive reduction in volunteers in this city, not from our not from our new volunteering groups, but in fact from traditional volunteers who are often older and who are more vulnerable, health vulnerable. As a result, we have a situation where we have community service organisations that have been hard hit. They need to be considered in this. But critically, we need to consider those people who don't pay rates, who actually pay rent. And renters do not benefit from rate waivers. They, in fact, do not benefit from the savings on rate rebates being passed on. And for those people that work in the arts, that work in insecure work and insecure roles, who got no support through JobKeeper, those people are doing it really tough. They are still paying the same rent they were in many cases, and they will not benefit from a rate waiver. So I want to see what we're going to do for those who don't pay rates but do still pay rent. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further speakers? As there's no further debate, Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. And first of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Dimitriakis for bringing this notice of motion to the council and seeking a report for us to consider at a later date. I remember early in the year I had put forward a similar motion, but unfortunately most councillors here did not support that motion and in fact did not even second the motion, and the motion lapsed. So I hope that this time around we actually can properly consider a motion like this, receive a report and make an informed decision about how we can further assist ratepayers in regards to a real rate relief. The other point that I would like to make is that the federal and state governments have bent over backwards to provide some sort of relief, financial relief to people affected by COVID. We've seen what the federal government has done, and also recently we've seen what the state government done in many forms, either pump priming the economy, paying direct subsidies for people because of their loss of employment, or actually providing grants or incentives to the community to actually increase business. So I think as a result of that, I think given that we're the third tier of government, I think the onus is on us to think of what we could do as a third tier of government in providing rate relief. It's important for the community. It creates trust between council and the community in terms of the council actually hearing from the community how they are hurting, and given that a lot of people are doing it really tough there in the community. And in particular, in terms of businesses, our shopping strips were really adversely affected. So I'm really looking forward for this report to come back, and I'm sure that our finances will enable us to accommodate any rate relief that we consider in the future.
Councillors, are there any further speak? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a quick statement that in reference to this item, that a number of councillors in the previous council actually went out to the community and asked if they were in favour of looking at such a thing in reducing our council rates. We had thousands of response come back regarding the petitions and also signing online. So I definitely look forward to seeing how we can go forward in advocating more for what our community is asking for, and I look forward to the report.
Thank you. Councillors, and then Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. While I'm going to support this motion, I have concerns about some of the way in which people are framing this discussion. Firstly, it's offensive to suggest that this council hasn't responded to COVID-19 and hasn't done a huge amount. In fact, our response and recovery package was one of the most generous, if not, outside of the City of Melbourne, the most generous in Victoria in terms of how much money and time has gone in from staff in this organisation, and in fact, rate money in.
Mayor Messina, if I can raise a point of order.
What reference, what item number, please?
In relation to.
Can you please declare the item number that you're?
I don't have it here, but it's in relation to a misrepresentation on the part.
You have the code of conduct in front of you, Councillor
It's not the code of conduct. It's
governance.
I'll ask the CEO to refer it to the particular clause in the governance rules.
Sorry, that's correct. Governance.
I'm sorry, I don't have a copy here with me. Otherwise, I would quote you the clause.
What's his point of order?
What's your point of order, Councillor?
The point of order is that I think it's wrong or incorrect for Councillor Rennie to say that this council or councillors have not considered the enormous work that we've already done in providing relief for our residents so far. I think that's a misrepresentation. I know, in fact, of my position and the position of all councillors here on council.
That's not what I actually heard. So, thank you, Councillor Greco. What I heard was an opinion, so I will continue. I will not allow that. I'll continue. Councillor Rennie still has a few more another minute on the clock.
So Councillor Rennie had 1 minute 25 seconds. Sorry, Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, because that's
just to be fair to her.
1 minute 20. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. The staff in this organisation are to be thanked and congratulated for the work that they have done. Many of them are absolutely thoroughly exhausted after a year of extraordinary effort responding to instances of the most extreme hardship in our community. And what we mustn't overlook with all this discussion about rate relief and rate rebates is that fundamentally those 80% of people in our community who own a home are not the most disadvantaged. The most disadvantaged, and I'm not saying they're not suffering or it hasn't been hard, but the most disadvantaged were knocking on the door of our emergency relief services and our homelessness agencies. They were seeking support for family violence, and our staff were there at the coalface. They had been seconded into those organisations. Close to $12 million of revenue from this council went into the response. And that is what equity is all about. And I'm proud that we as a council made that decision and that choice, and not the choice of some of our neighbours to give a cash splash, which was populist but ultimately did not increase equity. I hope that we will continue to be driven by equity and by responses that really consider who is most at need in our community. I know many people on JobKeeper. In fact, half of my family in the past year has been on JobKeeper, and I'm talking about 5 immediate family members have been on JobKeeper. And they've not lost income. And I think that we really need to remember that sort of blanket cashback may not increase equity.
Time.
And for council that talks a lot about equity, I think that's something we should
It's
be really
time,
mindful of.
Councillor Rennie. Thank you. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Newton.
Spoken.
Thank you, Member
Just
Singh.
one moment. Can we please keep a time on the clock, because it's a bit all over the place this evening. Can we square that? Thank you. It's difficult at times. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Member Sina. I will be supporting this motion as it's a report with options, but I really wanted to follow on from what Councillor Rennie said. I've also been somewhat at the coalface this year, going out with Reservoir Neighbourhood House, seeing some of the people who literally couldn't put food on the table. They're not ratepayers. They will never be ratepayers, and obviously everyone's in different situations, but I think the idea that ratepayers are the worst off is not necessarily correct. My experience, for example, my job isn't necessarily secure. I do have a job for next year, but Latrobe Uni does not have JobKeeper. They're losing about 500 staff this year out of 3,000. So, big issues for our community. But I will absolutely find the money to pay my rates because I know where it goes. And the thing that we've got to remember when we look at these options and we think about things like rate rebates or rate waivers is that we've already got a situation where our income was significantly down from last year. We already had capital works cuts. We already had a situation where clubs that might have wanted an upgrade this financial year have had to wait. We've already had that. We haven't had service cuts, and I don't want to have service cuts. And I think we really, really, really need to find the balance between supporting those that really need the financial hardship and making sure that we still have a rate base so we're not cutting services, so that the people who need family violence support, the people who need food relief, the people who need council services can continue that.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Any further speakers? Councillors, there's no further debate. I'd like to put this item to the vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. I declare that motion carried. Councillors, now what we have on the table is item number 9.2, the redevelopment of Reservoir Leisure Centre and the establishment of Darebin Chamber of Commerce. Councillor Lawrence, do you wish to move the motion?
Wish to move the motion.
Is the motion as listed on the screen?
Yes, Mayor, it is.
Do we have a seconder for your motion? Councillor Williams. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mayor Messina. Yes, this is another notice of motion that calls for a report to give us some insights into costs of upgrading Reservoir Leisure Centre. It also has a part in terms of establishment of Darebin Chamber of Commerce, which I know is a issue close to the heart of Mayor Messina, to try and develop a voice for business across the city of Darebin, which we unusually don't have and many other cities do. So it's a simple 2 motions to get more information and to come back into council for consideration. I'd just like to reflect a little bit about aqua leisure centres in our city. In 1994, a lot of councils were created and there was a lot of amalgamations. And I know some cities really grappled with having 3 pools that were all substandard, and it took a great deal of heartache for some of those cities to respond. Other cities, like Hume, had established pools but then had new growth areas and had to develop more and extra pools. The situation we inherited, just by way of history, was that in fact there was, I'm told by residents, a 50-metre pool at Reservoir that was then cut in half, and when they put a building over it, made it 25 metre. And there was, of course, an Olympic pool on St George's Road, and there was actually a number of pools there, and these things were built in the 1960s. So by poor governance in the 1980s, and I don't like to speak ill of a passed away city, the city of Preston, we saw a number of pools closed and disappeared or didn't get upkeep to maintain their facilities. So that's the inherited problem we have, and obviously we know the problem we have also with Northcote being a dilapidated leisure centre as well. So there have been two inherited problems. So I'd just like to hope that we get some information back and try and think about how we can develop our city and try and overcome these deficits that aren't to do with the last 4 years. They're to do with deficits go back to 1980s and poor decisions like to close even a 25-metre pool that was finally left on St George's Road. They closed, I think, around 92, 94. And their excuse was, oh, there's just pensioners living around here. And there was no thought for what was going to happen in terms of families. And I wish we had that pool.
10 seconds. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. All I'd like to say just quickly that it's great to see what other options that we can actually go ahead forward in reference to this notice of motion, especially to see what state and federal funding options are available. In reference to the 50-metre pool, it's an issue that I have found particularly schools struggling. Although we've been in COVID, so there's been a lot of carnivals. However, those carnivals that have occurred in the previous past is that majority of those schools who do the swimming carnivals have had to actually gone way outside of the municipality just to go to another facility to actually allow them to do the swimming carnivals that has a 50-metre pool. So I very much look forward to hearing back of what the report comes back with and to ensure that to see what our options are. Obviously these things are a very costly, a costly item that comes out of our budget. So it'd be interesting to see what state and federal funding that opportunities could arise from this, and hopefully that we can maybe look to a better future in developing Reservoir Leisure Centre and see if we can get a 50-metre pool.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Again, I'd like to thank Councillor Lawrence for bringing this notice of motion and including both points in relation to the Reservoir Leisure Centre and also the Darebin Chamber of Commerce. Just a few points in relation to the Reservoir Leisure Centre. Look, I think it's high time that here in this chamber that we have a thorough assessment, a financial assessment of how we could also include and build and rebuild the Reservoir Leisure Centre. Unfortunately, in the previous council, that debate or that discussion was blocked in terms of understanding how we could actually financially support the rebuilding both of the Northcote Aquatic Centre and also the Reservoir Leisure Centre. And I think it's important that we do that. I mean, before we were talking about equity. To me, it's a no-brainer in terms of equity in relation to completely rebuilding the Reservoir Leisure Centre. And I'm hoping that the report that does come back to council will provide us the financial analysis of how we could do that. We've got to keep in mind that interest rates are so low. They're historically low. And also the other thing that we have going in our favour is that there's a huge appetite for capital expenditure. And we've seen that the federal and state governments are throwing a lot of money around in order to get major capital works underway. And I think that if we think that pools can be built between $40 and $50 million, and I think there is the capacity there for council, with support from state or federal governments, together with our own finances, to make Reservoir Leisure Centre happen.
It's 10 seconds. Councillor Hannan, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Messina. Yes, look, I'm happy to support the motion in principle. Obviously, there's two parts of the motion, the Reservoir Leisure Centre and the Darebin Chamber of Commerce. I want to just speak about the second item. I actually agree with the rationale as listed with the motion in terms of having a more direct way to engage with business in Darebin and promote local business. I think the way that the motion is written has a specific model, or at least the name of a model in mind, a Darebin Chamber of Commerce, and I would hope that in looking at consideration of establishment of such a vehicle, they'd be looking more broadly at different ways to bring in the voice of business, especially local business in Darebin, mindful that that particular model, that particular wording is a conventional one, it's an establishment one. It may not be seen as engaging or appealing to many of our sort of innovative, newer businesses from different cultural, age, gender backgrounds. So, very supportive of creating a voice and a way of engaging with Darebin businesses, promoting Darebin businesses. Just not sure about that particular name and model, and I'd be hoping that the report would look at the question more broadly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannan. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I plan to vote in favour of this motion as well as the subsequent two motions. So I will rise once, I suppose, to speak in a way to all three, to say that I think the referral of these matters to discussions on the council plan is the appropriate place to have the discussion. But the Local Government Act is quite clear that our council plan should be determined via a process of deliberative democracy and participation with our community. And so whilst we may discuss these because they are being referred to our council plan, actually the Local Government Act demands that first and foremost we listen to our community. And so I'll be particularly listening to the views of our community in relation to these ideas. I also think it's worth noting that we can discuss these ideas, but ultimately we will have difficult choices to make, because we may pass the next three motions, but we will not be capable in a 4-year council plan of delivering everything in these next three motions, and that's without consideration of all the stuff that our community tells us through the mandated process of consultation that they want to see. And so I think that I commend those councillors who reworked their words and who agreed to a process to refer these to the council plan. It is actually the place for these discussions. I would urge people not to believe that because these motions get accepted tonight that these things will happen. This is a process question about how we go about having discussions. These things will be on the agenda for discussion, and so their merits can be debated. So will a dozen other things, 24, probably close to 100 other things, many of which will be ideas that come back from our community and which the Local Government Act, as I said, actually mandates that we have to
10 seconds.
First and foremost consider.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. Similar to Councillor Rennie, I'm inclined to support these motions that refer things to the council plan, not from the perspective that I actually agree with the solutions proposed, because I think, as Councillor Rennie has already pointed out, we haven't gone through that deliberative process. I would point out that in relation to how we do this, some councillors have chosen to put motions into the chamber to refer things to the council plan process, and that's fine, that's completely allowed. What is really important, though, as we start to think about the council plan, is about what are those things that are going to be most critical to deliver the greatest difference and the greatest benefit to our community. We actually don't know what that is. We haven't done that piece of work yet, because the council plan that we are currently in was formed 4 years ago. The world has changed, and it has changed in all sorts of interesting ways. Some of them are positive and some of them are incredibly challenging. to give one scope, and it goes to the point that Councillor Hannan raised before about how we engage with business, it's worth noting that the last figure that I saw, which was a couple of years ago, said that something like 55% of the jobs that people do in Darebin are home-based businesses. When you consider how we engage with business, how are we speaking to those people that are running micro-enterprises where it's their job and maybe possibly another person they bring on board? How do they participate in a collective economic conversation when there are big businesses that can carry a lot more weight? Likewise, when it comes to Reservoir Leisure Centre, what are the actual things that we want to see happen there? I've heard 50-metre pool, but what are the facilities for children, for young people? What is the thing that responds to the exact issue that Councillor Lawrence raised before,
10 seconds.
which is the demographic change that's taking place? So by all means, happy to refer to these to the council plan process, but by no means does that mean an endorsement of the ideas specifically. It's
time. Councillors, are there any further speakers? As there is no further debate, I'd like to put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that motion carried. Councillors, I just want to say a few words, given that the council at the Chamber of Commerce is something dear to my heart, so I wanted to thank Councillor Lawrence for bringing that attention to this chamber. Just in relation to the Chamber of Commerce, small business is the stimulus of a microeconomy, and small business also refers to service providers. It does not just pigeonhole traders, it's service providers. There are large sectors of the community. 55% of our community pay rates in terms of the facilitation through our income stream that are business providers. So I look forward to the evolution of the Chamber of Commerce. And can I also add, I do recall swimming in a 50-metre pool out in Preston many, many decades ago. Councillors, now we move over to item number 9.3, which is Global Learning Hub, the use of council-owned land and Cheddar Road medium strip. Councillor Williams, do you wish to move a motion?
Yes, please.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Williams' motion?
Mayor.
Oh, Councillor Demetriadis, I'm sorry. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. This is virtually 3 issues all jammed into one motion tonight. So it's receiving a report for early 2021 and to investigate the feasibility of building a global learning hub in Preston that incorporates social housing, airspace development and opportunities, and co-networking hub. The intent of this motion is to expand on places like the Preston Library, which is a place not only for learning, training and networking, but libraries are actually more valued and are useful when schools and childcare centres and community comes together. And we use it for more meetings and training rooms at the libraries. So it's no longer a place that you've been told to shh and be quiet. It's actually more of a gathering place, and we can do more in an area like libraries. In regards to temporary housing, it's paramount that all of council land and we look at all the options and airspaces for temporary housing. It's a no-brainer that we're actually running out of land, and council needs to start looking at ways of closing that gap. The intention of this report is to have stakeholders, including state government and social enterprises and not-for-profit housing associations, to cater for victims of domestic violence and homeless women over the age of 40 and youth that are between the ages of 16 and 21. Council recognises that there is an actual gap in the community, so therefore we need to maximise the funding opportunities, which is $5.3 billion in housing investment by the state government. So we need to try and obviously grab hold of that as early as possible and as quickly as possible so that we can start working in that area. This will not only address unemployment but also maximising the best return on investment of council land for the community. The beautification of Cheddar Road and the median strip, that council officers bring to council a briefing session to look at Cheddar Road and the median strip at the Broadway pop-up park. The Cheddar Road medium strip is underdeveloped and is an open space that's quite large. It's enormous potential to become a much more used and beautified open space. For residents across the north, like how it is in St George's Road, the medium strip has been vegetated. It is recognised that both medium strips are not strictly but responsibility of council, and therefore the process and options of beautifying the area will have to be done with the responsibility of Water Authority.
Thank you. Do I have a speaker? Councillor, yes, sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Councillor Dimitriadis, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I support this motion regarding the use of council land for temporary housing for victims of domestic violence, homeless women and youth. Also the feasibility of developing a global learning hub and the beautification of the Cheddar Road median strip. Sadly, as we are aware, across Australia, a woman is hospitalised from family violence every 2 hours, and a woman is killed by a current or previous partner every 9 days, as reported by the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. We also know there are many forms of abuse. They're not just physical, but which can also be damaging, and the possible consequences can be disastrous if support is not provided. Unfortunately, across Australia, including Darebin, it is known that the incidence of domestic and family violence has increased during the coronavirus pandemic. So now is the time for Council to provide further assistance where we can. Since young people between the ages of 16 and 21, women over 40 and victims of domestic violence often fall through the gaps when they need assistance, I believe Darebin can be in a position to provide unique support and provide temporary safe homes to those in need on land we own across the municipality. The Global Learning Hub will also be a great place for social housing and co-networking to support all Darebin residents to achieve. And in addition, the Cheddar Road medium strip, along with many other Darebin areas, are also in need of beautification. So I support the inclusion of these items as part of the 2021 to 2024 Council Plan.
Thank you for consideration. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Member Messina. I'd just like to propose a very small one-word amendment in 1B to change from victims of domestic violence to survivors of domestic violence.
Does the mover and the seconder agree to that?
Yes, that's no problem.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion? Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
I'd just also like to propose an amendment to the wording in point B, if I may, through you, Mayor, which is just to remove the references to the ages. It refers to homeless women over 40 and youth between the ages of 16 and 21. I think we could just say homeless women and youth and not have to specify the age groups.
Okay. Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
I'm not particularly wanting to remove that because I think that is a group that seems to be really impacted the most.
It has not.
I'd have to say no.
Councillor Dimitriadis?
No, it doesn't matter. The mover says no. So you need Councillor McCarthy needs a seconder now.
Does anybody want to second Councillor Rennie? Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. As councillors would be, sorry, and it's also to remove the reference to over 40 as well.
Can we get over 40 removed, please, Rashna?
I'm happy to speak, Mayor, if you wish. As councillors may be aware, I work in my non-council role in the youth sector, and I'm the CEO of a youth organisation and the state chair of a network of 31 organisations. So, and I've done work in the youth sector space for just over 20 years. So I feel I'm speaking from a position of what makes sense in the sector. And in relation to the definition of youth or young people, standard government definitions range anywhere for youth from 15 to 25 through to 12 to 25. 16 to 21 actually doesn't correlate with any definition of youth that we use in the sector when we talk about vulnerable young people or young people that are impacted by housing issues. I would also just note that Melbourne was host to a sensational youth homelessness conference held last year, hosted by the City of Melbourne and organised by the National Youth Commission. I'd like to see us engage not just in relation to the organisations that we think about, but also those organisations that are doing the pioneering work in relation to models of providing both housing opportunity and economic and education opportunity. And I just do a shout out for one of the models that that many of us heard about at the Youth Homelessness Conference last year, which is of course the Youth Foyer model, which is currently operating in a range of TAFE environments. In fact, involves state government land being used to provide housing for young people, and now the model's looking to be extended to other cohorts of vulnerability, where people are not only provided with housing but also educational and employment opportunity. And it's actually about solving those things, the housing first piece and the jobs first piece, which is absolutely essential. I see a natural synergy, in fact, to the idea of a global learning hub and the notion of providing housing, because ultimately, if we are going to invest and make available council land for any of these noble purposes, we want to do it in such a way that we actually change lives and actually help people transform through independence. And I think that's the merit of what's being put forward here, but we need to get really clear about not accidentally excluding people. Likewise, women who are homeless, there is an over proportion of women in the older age group who are technically homeless but may not identify as homeless. Likewise, we have a group of young women in our community right now who are couch surfing, under 40, highly vulnerable, and some of them are involved also in the sex industry as well. So there are multiple factors affecting people as to why they become homeless, why they stay homeless. And we just need to make sure we don't exclude people accidentally.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. Very briefly, I'd just like to pick up on the point about women and the arbitrary nature of selecting the age of 40. I couldn't understand why 40 would be chosen. It doesn't correspond with any government priority or prerogative around older homeless women, and there is a priority and a recognition that that is a group at need, but 40 is never the age referred to in that. And so I think if we're going to put in age ranges, it is important that they correspond with state government priorities, and that wasn't the case with the ages in there. So I would urge councillors to support this, and if in fact the intention for Councillor Williams was that older women at risk of homelessness receive this support, then I would urge you to support this and for someone to actually move a subsequent amendment to put in the word older women at risk of homelessness or something, because I think that 40 was too arbitrary an age. It's neither young nor old. It's smack in the middle, excludes people who are 39 and opens the door for 41. So on that basis, I ask all my colleagues to support this, and if Councillor Williams specifically wanted the directive to be towards older women at risk of homelessness, then perhaps someone could make that amendment, or it could remain open and more inclusive to all.
Councillors, do we have any further speakers? I'll now put that to the vote. We are voting on what we have in front of us, in front of the screen at the moment.
The amendment.
All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Greco, you've abstained. That motion is carried.
So now you return to the substantive.
Do we have, this becomes a substantive motion. Do we have any speakers on this particular motion? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll support this because it is referring, the first part is referring these items to consideration of the council plan. These are items, they have merit. There are other items which I know other councillors wish to bring to the table. And what I'd really like to see through the council plan process is where we look at how these ideas can be brought together with opportunities that we know exist. I refer back just before, Mayor, to the reference to something like the Youth Foyer model, where there is state government funding that may become available in the next 2 years, perhaps even sooner, and perhaps we can be opportunistic to put ourselves on the table and say, we would like to be a city that uses its land to deliver real benefit. We actually have a TAFE in this city, being Melbourne Polytechnic, which is just down the road from here. It does not have a youth foyer. It does not have the model that I just spoke about. It has land, it has an opportunity and a desire, and in fact has done some extraordinary work, given that it was one of the sponsors of the Youth Homelessness Conference I mentioned just before. we also have the wonderful model of the global learning centres that exist in the City of Hume, and I know Mayor and yourself and I have both been there on different occasions. Once again, the integration of good services, good models that bring together housing first, jobs first and education first as public policy principles. But we can't do this on our own. And I say that because these are noble things. They need the right attention and focus, but they must be pursued through partnership. And there are willing partners that are ready to come to the table. I would hope that we would be working closely with our state government counterparts, because they actually have not just the resources but the planning provisions to make these things possible very quickly, and also the investment vehicles to make these things possible. I would also say that there are models for each of these things that are available. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's work smart and let's work together.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion as written. I think it's a bit late to do wordsmithing, but hopefully the intent about older women isn't lost in this redrafting. I think they're now been excluded, but I'll be supporting this motion, and hopefully the report picks up the deficiencies in the drafting.
We note that in the report. Can we note that in the report?
It's not a report, it's referring it to the council.
Oh, to the council plan, sorry. But apologies, we did have it as a report and we changed it. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I'd just like to raise a couple of points. Firstly, in relation to housing, I think there's a great opportunity in regards to airspace, and we should fully explore what the opportunities are in regards to that, because not only does council have land, but more importantly, council has a lot of airspace that it actually could put to some social use in an appropriate agreement, either with either tier of government as a way of providing opportunities for more social housing. But the point that I really want to raise, given that it's a motion that covers a number of points, is in relation to Cheddar Road, the medium strip. Part of that medium strip is actually the boundary of my ward. Look, it's a long-standing issue that medium strip has just been an open paddock for many, many years. Ever since I've been on council, and decades before that. It just surprises me how that medium strip can be so bare and so unattended in terms of having further things on them, whilst instead in St George's Road, which is a similar medium strip, has been worked up over the years to quite an impressive level. And I think we could take lessons from that in terms of how we can extend the example of St George's Road up to the Cheddar Road medium strip. And why I say that, because the same obstacles that are apparently so apparent in Cheddar Road were once apparent, were the obstacles that were faced by St George's Road. So I think in opening up a dialogue with the various authorities that cover that medium strip, I think we should be aiming to achieve something similar, if not
10
better,
seconds.
to what has happened over the years in St George's Road.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Do we have any further speakers? Councillors, as there is no further debate, I'd like to put that into the vote. All those in favour? That I declare that item carried. Councillors, now we move over to item number 9.4, the referral of the review of Darebin Planning Scheme, Edwards Lake water quality issues and provision of registered aged care services for consideration as part of the preparation of the draft council plan. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I now wish to declare a general conflict of interest in relation to this notice of motion in relation to aged care packages, as I work in the aged care sector currently, and this relates to council's role and activity as a potential registered aged care provider, and accordingly I'll have to leave the room and I'll ask Councillor Greco as a Deputy Mayor who will assume the chairperson's role. Now, I also note at this particular time that Councillor Greco is also the mover of the notice of motion. So now I will leave the room and I'll ask Councillor Greco to take my seat.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I assume the role of chair, but as the mayor mentioned, I'm the author of the notice of motion, and it's been brought to my attention that our governance rules don't permit a mover, the chair, to actually move a motion, and therefore, as a result of that, given that I can't, I'm the author of the motion, the notice of motion before us, I call on nominations for a temporary chair so that I can resume my seat and then move that motion.
I nominate.
Are there any nominations for a temporary chair?
I nominate Councillor Williams for temporary
I
chair.
have one nomination, Councillor. Any further nominations for a temporary chair? Yes, Councillor Newton.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Rennie.
Councillor Rennie, do you accept Councillor Rennie? Yep. Nomination. Okay. Are there any further nominations for a temporary chair?
Deputy Mayor, if I can just ask...
You speak up, please.
Can I just ask, just in relation to the governance rules, I'm just not clear if that's actually a correct interpretation, that the Deputy Mayor steps in as chair.
Councillor McCarthy, I've had instructions earlier from the CEO and from our corporate governance officers that given the peculiar circumstances that we are in, that this is the procedure that we're following. So I have two nominations. Are there any further nominations?
Can I make this easier by saying that I'd prefer to actually second Councillor Williams than proceed in any other way? So on the basis that Councillor Lawrence nominated Councillor Williams, I'm happy to second her. Maybe we could just proceed to a vote.
Yep, so I can withdraw my nomination.
You're withdrawing your nomination?
I'm happy to withdraw my nomination for Councillor Rennie. Yep.
So, councillors, am I correct? We only have one nomination for a temporary chair, and that's Councillor Williams. Okay. Given that we have no further nominations, Councillor Williams, would you like to assume the chair?
Councillor Greco, do you wish to move the motion?
Yes, Acting Chair. I wish to move the motion in relation to the home care item.
I'd just like to confirm, as is on the screen, that that's what you're moving this evening?
From what I could see, because my eyesight's not that bad, but if it's what it's in the report, I'm happy to move that, yes.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Diatrimiakis? Okay, Councillor Greco, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Chair Williams. I hope that's the right title. Look, I'm moving this notice of motion and in relation to home care. And why I'm moving this motion is that we've had some considerable discussion in council over the last 3 years about what council is going to do into the future in relation to its home care services. As we all know, on June 2022, council will be faced with a decision of whether the federal government continues bulk funding or not. I think we have 18 months' time leading up to that decision by the federal government in terms of making a decision of whether council should become a registered home care package provider or not, or essentially exit out of providing home care packages, because the reading at the moment is that after June 22nd, after June 9, 2022, that the federal government will no longer bulk fund councils. As a result of that, councils will not receive funding to provide perhaps the level of home care services that it needs to. To do that, it would have to become a registered home care provider. So what this motion therefore does is that it actually asks council to start to consider this and to seriously look at it and look at what are our options in terms of whether council ought to become a registered home care provider. Becoming a home care provider, and I'm looking forward to what comes back from our officers leading up to the council plan, is that it will help us consider the value of our service that the Darebin Council has been undertaking for the last 2 decades that I'm aware of, or even more, and that Darebin Council is one of the most considered councils in relation to providing this really important service. What it will also do is help us to reach a point where we can provide some certainty both to our residents that receive council services and so that we can provide some certainty to them of whether council will continue to provide registered home care packages to them. And also, most importantly too, it'll provide some certainty to our employees. We have over 200 people, I understand, that work in this sector, and so that'll be really important. So I'm hoping for some information reports to come back so council can make an assessment
Councillor.
in relation to becoming a home care registered provider.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I speak in support of the important motion of Councillor Greco. As we know, the 2021 to 2024 Council Plan is an important document that sets out the path for Darebin Council over the next 4 years and how it will impact residents and businesses in Darebin. Over the decades, many residents in our community, who in many instances have been paying rates for decades in the area, have relied on cost-effective council services, including aged care services that have been provided by the council. As part of federal government changes, bulk funding received by council is expected to cease in June 2022, as Councillor Greco mentioned, in favour of a new client-focused model. However, currently Darebin is excluded from being able to provide home care packages after this time, and as we are not a registered aged care provider. I support the motion for consideration to be given to the options and benefits of council becoming a registered aged care provider in the council plan. Darebin residents in need of aged care services deserve the highest quality and most cost-effective service provisions, as well as the choice to continue to receive services from the council they have known and relied on historically. Thank you.
I'd just like to, thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to clarify that we are debating the whole notice of motion. It hasn't been split up in this situation. Happy with that? Apologies for not stipulating that at the start. Are there any other speakers to this? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Councillor Williams. Look, just to go over this is obviously very concerning issue, the deregulation of home care, aged care packages. It was foreshadowed prior to the previous election, and the federal government backed off because they just didn't want one more unknown or a backlash. But they still are now proceeding on to June 2022. So it is something that we need to deal with about the options and feasibilities if we could stay as a quality provider. But I think, we all need to be honest about this. Is a very uncharted water. Deregulation's been terrible in so many other sectors, and it's really unfortunate that that's confronting us. But we'll have to look at all the factors about whether we can actually, what part of that market, the deregulated market, we could possibly intervene in and provide some options for people. And who knows, maybe that's something, in terms we have spoken before about partnerships with other agencies. Just on the lake, Edwards Lake in 1919 was a wetland which was then dammed in by returned soldiers and was perfectly clean water. Now it is silt contaminated. We had botulism outbreaks in 1998. We've addressed them with some engineering model, but we still have actual toxic chemicals in there from a range of industries that sent their stuff straight down Central Creek and straight down Edgars Creek, and through the stormwater system. So it's time we really have a look at it and really address it. It'll be confronting, and it's certainly not a task we could do by ourselves, as we've seen with...
Time's up, Councillor Lawrence. Do we have any other further questions? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to propose just a couple of words to be added to point 2. In both instances where it says the water quality, to insert the words after water quality and biodiversity values. So there's 2 instances there. To address the water quality and biodiversity values of Edwards Lake, and then again at the end of that paragraph to improve the long-term water quality and biodiversity values of Edwards Lake. So I'd like to propose those amendments.
Does the mover and seconder...
Happy to accept that.
Does the seconder accept that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. If I can speak to it now as well.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to acknowledge that whilst this is simply referring to the council plan process, I'm pleased to see the change in approach that Councillor Greco is proposing by virtue of this notice of motion, which really talks to the model of collaboration that is absolutely essential if we are to see the sort of changes that we are talking about here at Edwards Lake. The pollution and the contaminants that exist in the lake come from a range of sources. Our own report that we commissioned tells us that. Industrial pollution upstream is a major source of pollution in Edwards Lake. You cannot clean the lake up unless you deal with the industrial pollution in the waterways, in Edgars Creek and in Merry Creek and in the surrounding water system and the catchment system more generally. You cannot address what is in Edwards Lake unless you address those issues. So this is an environmental regulation issue, not a water recreation issue. And I say that because we do not want to give the community the false impression that we can drain the lake, refill it, and the water is clean again. It will be contaminated, within weeks, months, and to a similar situation to what we find it today. But I mention the biodiversity values because I think this has been the missing part of this conversation. And as councillors who went on the journey recently with the Darebin Nature Trust would know, and Councillor Lawrence made reference to the wetland, and I thank him for doing so, which prompted me to put forward this amendment. Our waterways are not just bodies of water that sit there. They are a part of life. They are part of the thing that supports life systems, and we just have to recall when there was a whole lot of fish that died in Edwards Lake that caused a great level of concern in the community, to know that it is not a safe place for life in that sense, but it is also not performing to the extent that we need it to support bird life, to support other forms of life that actually need waterways and need clean water accessible. So I support it on the basis that it's referring it to the council plan, but I'm really pleased that we include biodiversity in that conversation.
Which has been included. Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak this motion? Okay, I will put this to vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Thank you. Please invite the Mayor back into the room and resume as the role as the chairperson.
Councillors, can I just make a comment? During that discussion, there was a note passed from Councillor Messina to a councillor that was clearly visible on the screen. I just want to confirm and acknowledge that the note noting the fact that Councillor Messina had declared a conflict of interest to the previous item, I just want to confirm that I have had the matter and the note reviewed, and it had nothing to do with the item that was being debated, so it's of no consequence to the debate.
Thank you.
Just for the record.
Thank you very much. Now, councillors, we move over to item 9.5, Preston Market. Councillor Greco, do you want to move the motion?
Yeah, happy to move that notice of motion.
Can we have that on the screen?
Actually, I move it with a further point, which I've included there as I circulated a note to our officers that picks up on an additional point in relation to the I can't see because it's just too small writing.
It says, item number 3, write to the VPA and the developer to notify them that the Heart of Preston assessment tool may be reviewed to consider the above points.
There's that, but there was also an additional point because I read Councillor Rennie's amendment, and there was an additional point, that point therefore to be included in the motion that I'll be moving. I'm not sure if officers received that.
Item number 4, that becomes item number 5, I'm assuming.
That's fine.
We're just renumbering the items. So item number 5, organise a meeting with the MP for Preston, Robin Scott, and the Mayor to discuss the Preston Market redevelopment and any updates prior to the briefing in February. Is that correct, Councillor Greco? Do we have a seconder for Councillor Greco's motion?
Sorry, not to second, Mayor, but can I ask, I think there's a concern about one of the points, whether it's actually, we can actually consider it. Can I ask a question before it's seconded?
Certainly.
It's based on councillors would have received an email, and I had to check to see if there's nothing confidential in there, but in relation to...
Who was the email from, Councillor McCarthy?
Sorry, from our General Manager.
What time was that generated?
Sorry?
What time was that circulated?
This morning, Mayor. Just to understand whether point 1B, whether point 1B as read on screen can be proposed given the information in that email put forward to councillors today. That's a question through you to the
Through me
to the
to,
officers.
I'm assuming, to Rachel Olivia, to the officer.
Through you, Mayor, there's nothing that would prevent council forming a view on the motion on the screen, in my view.
Do we have any further questions, Councillor McCarthy? No. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Greco's motion? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Councillors, I'm bringing this motion tonight in relation to seeking a report regarding the Preston Market. And what this motion does is that, and let's be clear, it is seeking a report, and then it's seeking a report in order to review the current envelope that in regards to Preston Market. We have a criteria at the moment that is sitting before us, and what the report actually looks at is proposing to look at is a couple of salient points in that criteria. And those salient points are in relation to heights in regards to that particular site, and it's asking in the report to consider the question of having height limits up to 12 stories. The other thing that it's also looking at in relation to the Preston Market is about the position of Preston Market. The current criteria that we have talks about that the market could be moved or it could stay where it is. And so what this report that will be coming back to us is looking at the issue of leaving the market where it is. They're the two main points, and also the other point too is about the heritage overlay. And what this motion looks at is that it talks about how council can actually properly inform the development of the heritage overlay and not necessarily leave that totally to the VPA. And why council needs to do that? Because there are heritage overlays and there are heritage overlays. And I think that we need to examine the strongest possible heritage overlay that we can apply to protect the Preston Market, to leave it in situ, and to ensure that the heritage overlay is not whitewashed, as it could potentially be whitewashed through other means that possibly the VPA or the state government could come up with. Look. So the idea of this motion is to get a report back where we can hopefully have tighter controls over the market site, because soon in the following year we will be having the planning controls presented to us by the VPA, and like that we could have tighter criteria on which we measure what the VPA actually comes up with. And I'm hoping that we can get this report in February before the VPA comes out with its report, so that we've got a better means of assessing what the VPA, the state government, is coming with. And finally, I'd like to thank Councillor Rennie, because I have taken one aspect of her proposed amendment and incorporated it into my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Do we have any further speakers?
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Councillor Dimitriadis.
Thank you. Just in regards to point 3 of the notice of motion, at the end, can we put that if the report permits? So basically, if the report allows changes, if we agree that we should be having changes, can we then write to the VPA and notify the developer about the changes to the heart of Preston assessment tool, rather than write to them preemptingly before it actually happens?
So you're proposing an amendment?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yes. So can we please have some words to the amendment? So the amendment would read, write to the VPA and developer to notify them of the Heart of Preston assessment tool after the report has been provided to council. Is that correct?
We could do both, actually. Yeah.
So I just one at a time.
Yes, Mayor. Or so after the report's been considered. Yeah.
Write to the VPA and developer to notify them that the Heart of Preston assessment tool may be reviewed and to be considered the above points after the report has been provided.
Can I make a suggestion that I think what Councillor Dimitriadis is after is perhaps to begin point 3 with the words following
report.
Receipt of the report, write to the VPA.
Yep. Sounds a little bit better.
Apologies, Councillor Dimitriadis. I hope that's what you were aiming.
So what you?
Yes, that's what I meant, because we don't know if the report will actually advocate, what the report will say. So there's, I didn't feel that there was any need to let them know beforehand that we're maybe reviewing it.
Following receipt of the report, write to the VPA and the developer to notify them the Heart of Preston assessment tool may be reviewed.
Perhaps to notify them of any updates.
Yeah, or any updates or any changes.
Can we have that amended, please? Preview to consider any updates.
So, if I might, Mayor, I think what I'm hearing is following receipt of the report, write to the VPA and the developer to notify them of any updates or changes
To the Heart of
Preston assessment tool, full stop.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Is that?
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Is that
I'm
Councillor?
happy to accept it.
Councillor Demetriadis, can I just confirm that that's what you wanted in the amendment?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Happy to accept it as a seconder.
Okay. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Hannan?
Thank you. I appreciate the intent of what I see as the intent of the amendment to give ourselves some options, but I actually think it speaks to reservations that I have about the motion overall. It's committing us to a course of action at this point before we actually receive the report. So even to say that we will write to them is predetermining our response after we get the report. I think it's most appropriate to actually get the report and determine our course of action then rather than now. So I have a problem with that.
Councillor Hannan, are you foreshadowing an amendment?
Isn't it a matter of whether I support the current amendment? I'm not.
The amendment's been
I'm
incorporated.
wondering whether you're foreshadowing an amendment. Is that what you were inclining to? But it looks like you're not, so that's okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Councillor McCarthy, did you want to speak?
I was going to propose an amendment, Mayor, which was just to actually strike out point 3 for the same reason that Councillor Hannan was outlining. That was the first amendment I was going to propose.
Can I just check? Sorry, councillors. So can I just check, Councillor Hannan, have you finished debating from a governance perspective?
Just on that particular amendment, I've finished.
Can I just say, sorry, from a governance point of view?
So from a governance perspective, the amendment has been incorporated by agreement by the mover and the seconder. So
I beg your pardon.
now back to the substantive.
Spoke against the substantive.
Well, then I'd be speaking against the substantive on the general basis that it, as I said, it commits us to a predetermined action.
Okay.
And can I just ask to make sure that we have the clock running correctly? Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
So Mayor, I was going to propose that we actually strike out point 3 altogether.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor McCarthy?
So if it might be accepted by the mover and seconder.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not accepted by the mover.
No? Okay. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Hannan? Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I have a few concerns about this motion overall in light of information that councillors have received just today. I can't go into that information. But what I can say is that it is unusual for council to seek a report and then to indicate what it may do following receipt of that report, and certainly to foreshadow a course of action that it may or may not take depending on that report. There is information which councillors have and have only just received today. There is also information that is public information, such as in the Government Gazette, that is public information that says that the state government and the minister has in fact signed off on the mandatory height controls for a further 12 months. For the same token, I have concerns about other clauses in this, about whether it actually sends a really problematic message to the government that in fact makes us look like we are more pro-development of the Preston market than in fact the state government is right now. So I have concerns about the fact that we are sending mixed messages, but particularly concerned in relation to point 3 that it seeks to prejudge the course of action. I trust that when the report comes back to council, should this motion be adopted, then we determine who we write to at that point in time, and the things upon which we write to them. Otherwise, we are creating unnecessary expectations and potentially setting ourselves up for a very difficult situation in February, which I don't think we want to do for our officers or for our community.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Hanning, would you like to speak to the amendment?
No, I think that's covered it. Thank you.
Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina, I'd like to speak in favour of this motion. Look, I don't have a problem with word point 3. It's been edited by a number of councillors. I find the term there of any changes sort of, to me, has the meaning, you know, if any changes, because it's not saying of the changes. So just from a pure grammatical area, it's actually it implies a possible tense rather than a determined tense. But anyway, I like writing all these things and going between languages. But so I don't think that that's problematic, because I don't think it actually preempts any action. It says any changes. That's if there's changes. It's not saying the changes. So it would be preempting if it said the changes, and I don't think it does that. Look, I have my own views about height controls on Preston Market, and they reflect decisions we've made at Summerhill and decisions we've made at Bell City. And so I think those sort of decisions about heights are reflected in recent VCAT hearings, and I think they're just mirroring what council's made decisions in major commercial centres across this whole city. So, but I probably don't mind getting a report talking about 12 stories, because that report may actually throw up some other issues to us, which of course are height limits that aren't mandatory, etc., etc. So I think there's a deficiency in our current submission. It doesn't indicate a height, and I think we should kind of front up to that. Whatever that is, you know, is something we need to decide, because we've got influence, more influence than we think.
Councillors, are there any further speakers? Councillor Newton.
I'm on the substantive, right?
No, it's the amendment.
Amendment, okay.
Amendment.
In that case, no, I want to speak on the substantive.
So, councillors, the amendments as it stands on the screen, do we have any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thanks, Mayor Messina. Look, I'll be speaking against the amendment to remove point number 3. Look, I think it's only courtesy that that once we get back the report and we go through this review that's been suggested in the substantive motion, and that we inform the VPA, who are the responsible authority and who will be issuing the planning controls over the market, of what the council's position will be, whether it's the existing position or whether it's an updated position. So I think it's just mere courtesy that that we flag to the VPA that essentially the VPA will probably know of this motion if it gets through, that we are reviewing the criteria, and that the VPA will, out of courtesy, be informed, and it will be an obligation on the part of the council to inform the VPA and the minister and the other parties about what the council, what updates there are in regards to the position that we may assume in next year. So on that basis, I just don't see what the logic behind removing point 3 is.
Councillors, do you have any further speakers? As there's no further debate, councillors, I wanted to remind you that we're actually voting for the amendment on the screen. All those in favour?
On the screen.
All those against? Councillor Williams, Councillor Demetriadis, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Greco. That's 4 against and 4 in favour. That means that I have the deciding vote, and I'm going to be voting for it in favour.
So that,
I declare that motion carried.
so return to the substantive.
So that becomes a substantive motion.
Deleted, yeah.
Can we please delete item number 3?
And you're up to Councillor Greco.
So we've heard from Councillor Greco and Councillor Hannan. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Newton, sorry.
Thank you, Member Messina. I'd like to speak against the substantive motion. So I don't accept the premise that this is the right time to be looking at the heart of Preston again, because we know that the VPA is coming to us in March with their recommendations. And just before I had a look at the Heart of Preston document, which we worked on from January 2018 to May 2019, we had, for example, 1,138 conversations about it. We had 485 people visit the on-site pop-ups and 526 surveys were completed, for example. The Heart of Preston document is solid. It was done over 18 months plus with thousands of members of our community. And it actually, if you look at it, it actually has a lot of what is in this motion already. So it talks about, for example, the market footprint is the same or larger. It talks about ensuring a vibrant mix of traders remains. It talks about 20% affordable housing, and it talks about ensuring that the use remains. So for me, this is not the right time for this motion, and I think that, as per officer advice, it could arguably put us in a weaker position with the state government and the developers going forward. So I do not support this motion in any way.
Councillors, are there any? We've heard from Councillor Greco, Councillor Hannan, Councillor Newton. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Messina. I have an amendment which has been circulated and sent to council business. Yes, that's correct. That's the amendment on the screen.
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Newton.
We could just check if it's acceptable to the mover and the seconder.
Sorry. Is it acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
I'd just like to ask, through you, Mayor Messina, whether this motion is actually contrary to the intent of the substantive motion.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll put that over to Mr. Maher.
Through you, Mayor Messina. The amendment which we're aware of, we've looked at and is appropriate and can be considered by the council.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Greco? Is that acceptable to you?
No, it's not accepted.
Can we have a seconder for Councillor Rennie's motion, please? Councillor Newton. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. I think the complexity of the debate tonight and the questions and the back and forth is a reflection of the fact that we're operating in an environment of great uncertainty without all the accurate information about the current situation, about where things are at, and without some councillors having had the benefit of spending as much time as many of us have actually perusing the appropriate documents. Planning decisions should not be made on the hop, and they shouldn't be considered without an opportunity for everyone to be able to spend an appropriate amount of time going into the detail of the documents. Councillor Greco's notice of motion does actually foreshadow or send council in the direction of a significant change to council's position, and a significant change to council's position should be considered in the context of everybody being up to date with the information. Added to that, just today we received information of a VCAT decision that overturns council's refusal to extend the planning permit. We haven't had time, given that that decision came to us this morning, to actually understand how VCAT's decision impacts on the notice of motion that we're considering tonight. With these factors in front of us, I actually think it would be irresponsible to direct council towards one outcome when in fact what my amendment suggests is that we have a briefing so that we can all come up to speed. It still picks up Councillor Greco's desire to address those issues around location and height. So that's quite specifically in point E, consideration of the merits, opportunities and options of reviewing council's current position on siting of the market and height for the development plan. So it does not gloss over or ignore those. It puts them in the mix for consideration at a briefing, given the importance, the strategic importance of this site and the time and effort that has been invested by this council, by the VPA and by others. I think it is only responsible that we actually take our time, that we don't rush into a decision and that we get a briefing particularly on what VCAT's decision that we became aware of this morning means. It's a very disappointing decision that VCAT has made. We had hoped that they would see Council's argument that the strategic context of the site had changed so significantly that the planning permit that had been issued several years ago was no longer appropriate. Unfortunately, they haven't listened to their arguments, and I know that everybody here shares my disappointment in relation to that. But given that that planning permit was for a 14-storey building, I don't know how we reconcile a recommendation here or a suggestion here that we should have a 12-storey limit. And I think these are the sorts of issues that need to be teased out, that we need to consider in the fullness of time, and that we will end up and our community will end up with a better planning outcome for taking the time to do it properly.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Newton, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Messina. So again, thinking about timing, we're 3 days before Christmas. I hope that everyone will be having a break over Christmas. So the reason why I do support this amendment is because this allows us that time. As Councillor Rennie was saying, we've had changes that we've heard of about the Preston market just this morning. And what this allows us to do is for our officers to find out what the latest status is. It looks forward to March, and we're expecting to hear more from the VPA. And it allows us to have the time and space that we need to ensure that we are heading in the right direction. And this is something that I'm much more comfortable with. I think the fact that Robin Scott, the local MP, is involved is fantastic. And yeah, as Councillor Rennie was saying, this is such a changing environment, and this is, going by the last 4 years, this is the planning application, the site that we probably spent the most time on. I don't think we can rush it, and I think having a briefing in February 2021 allows us not to.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Do we have Councillor McCarthy?
I want to thank Councillor Rennie for putting forward this, because I think it actually strikes a fine balance between what Council's position has been, the events of recent days, and of course the two decisions that councillors were informed about today, both of which have a serious and material impact on our consideration of this item. We are not the planning authority. The state government is the planning authority. The minister has wisely moved to gazette the mandatory height limit for the further 12 months, which protects the site from an ad hoc proposal such as what we saw in 2017, and therefore it actually holds off. Sorry, Mayor, I find it a little bit hard when I have councillors interjecting. It's thrown me, and I'd like to have the time back on the clock, please.
Thank you.
Don't think that's appropriate.
I'll add another 20 seconds.
Thank you. One of the things that's really important for us to keep in mind here is that the minister is the decision maker. The minister is the decision maker. The next most influential person in this situation is our local MP, Robin Scott, whose office is just down the street. If I put myself in the shoes of the minister, who we have worked with cooperatively, I would want to make sure that the council is solid and is making decisions that are aligned with good planning processes. If I'm Robin Scott and I read that we're about to completely open up the piece without actually looking at what the government has decided, let alone what VCAT has decided, I think I'd be a little bit concerned. So I'm primarily concerned here about keeping a strong alignment with Robin Scott on this issue, because he has been the person who has managed to turn the mind of the minister to supporting mandatory height controls off the back of an incredibly strong community campaign. We do not want to lose our political allies in this by running off without all the information. This does not stop us from looking at Heart of Preston. We need to look at it. I support looking at it, because the 10 and 14-storey buildings approved undermine some of the principles that we have.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina, I rise to speak against the amendment. I don't think the amendment adds anything to our position. As I said before, I think the current VCAT decision reflects both past council decisions on the site, on Summerhill, and also at Bell City. So it's not an outrageous decision to me. It's one that I would have expected. However, there was other reasons we were asking VCAT to delay that area, that permit, and they were to do with the actual construction of the level crossing, which I think is a highly different matter. So the controversial matters in the VCAT decision don't have any weight on the original motion put by Councillor Greco. I think people have been playing sort of strange game for 4 years about height controls. And I remember in 2015 and 2016, some parts of the community said 10 stories was too high. But of course, the mandated 10-storey height limit on the old structure plan was exactly why the developer could not get through a 28-storey application that was proposed for the northwest corner. And of course, that then led us to the review of the DDOs and the structure plan. And I'm very keen that we actually take a local position on height. We seem to keep just dodging it. So this replacement of amendment, I think, is totally contrary to the original motion, and in fact, again, dodges doing a mandated height limit. And
10 seconds.
And that's a repeat of the last 4 years, because we've had the repeat of voting down mandated heights on this site before.
Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Member Messina. First of all, I'd like to say that the substantive motion is not making a decision on the market, it's seeking a report. So it's not correct to say that we're making a decision. Also, I'd like to point out is that this amendment is, when you read it, it's openly very vague. It's a vague amendment, and it's very broad in terms of what type of information that it is requesting. When we look at structure plans across our city, what do structure plans have? Structure plans have heights. Structure plans talk about heights. So why is it that we have got an aversion to talk about heights in relation to the Preston market? Because the planning controls that are going to come to us are essentially, if you like, a structure plan for that particular site. What is the aversion of us actually properly considering what sort of heights would be appropriate for that site? The three salient points that the community have been telling us, and particularly through the election campaign, one is about the heights that's been talked about. The other point is about the location of the market, where the vast majority of the community has been insisting that the market stays where it is in its current footprint. And the other salient point is the heritage overlay. The news that we've had this afternoon actually shows to me that we have a very aggressive developer. You know, the fact that they've gone to VCAT and been able to get an extension on their planning permit. Given that the developer has a very aggressive agenda in relation to this site, we need to review our criteria, and we need to review it keeping in mind those three salient points that I talked about. Because if we don't have those three salient points as the main points of the report that comes back to us, I think we're going to miss the boat on what actually we need to consider in a future report that comes to Council.
Councillors, do we have any further comments? Councillor, as that ends the debate, I'd like to put this particular motion up for the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That motion is carried. This now becomes the substantive motive. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Mayor, I'll speak in favour of the substantive, and I thank councillors for the debate. I want to just speak to the spirit with which the motion seeks to move us from the position, and I unfortunately didn't get to say this before because I ran out of time, but the position that we have had as a council with the Heart of Preston was to seek to operate on the basis of good principles, good planning principles that we understood would be attractive to both the Minister and the Victorian Planning Authority in terms of getting them to, as far as possible, agree with those principles and therefore protect those things that we love, not only about the market, but also around the market. And I want to just refer to one thing that I've been particularly concerned about throughout this whole debate, which is, and it only came through the Heart of Preston planning process, was in fact the risks that we have to the surrounding amenity, to Kramer Street Oval, to Kramer Street, to the whole piece. What we have by virtue of the VCAT decision that we're aware of is that now there is going to be some high buildings that will be placed at the northern end of the site. And what that means is that some of those principles may still apply, but some of those principles may need to be rethought and reworked. I'm really concerned when we talk about mandatory heights and talk about a high figure, because what that sends the message to the community is in fact that the whole thing could be 12 stories, and we don't want that. I don't think anyone wants that. Or it could be a donut. We don't want a donut either. We actually need the market to be protected, but we actually need also to be aligned however we can with our local member and to be persuasive to the minister. What we have in front of us there, I think, gets us on the same page. And it goes to the very issue which Councillor Greco was raising, which is how do we look at the heritage issue? How do we look at the heights issue? How do we look at the siting issue? I think Councillor Rennie's done that quite eloquently, and I really support the motion.
Thank you. Do you have any further speakers, councillors? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I'd also like to speak in favour of the motion and also to address some of the things that have come up in debate. Firstly, I am in support of height limits on the site. I don't think it should be open slather. But I think it's important with height limits to note that they shouldn't be a flat limit across the whole site. And that's why plucking a figure out of the air and saying that's the figure, whether it's 8, whether it's 10, whether it's 12, is not the way to go. Because when you look at great development, it is made up, in sites like this, of buildings of different heights at different parts of the site. And that might mean that at some points it's 4, at some points it's 8, and at some points it's 12, perhaps even in the centre it could go to 14 or 15. We don't know until we see what that built form might start to look like, but I can guarantee that when we look at the sites around Darebin, where we've seen development plans come up, if you look at the Northern Horizon site down on Arthurton Road, they propose different heights at different points of the development site. And that is better planning, and it creates a much better visual look from a distance than if everything is the same height. So yes, heights, but let's actually have a discussion what that might look like. The other thing is in relation to the situation of the market. I've spoken to lots of people in our community also, and what people want is they want to know that the market is going to be there in 50 years' time, and I'm 100% committed to that outcome. I'm not convinced that the current fabric in the current location is the way to guarantee the market there in 50 years' time. I want to look at all solutions. I want to keep the options open, because I've heard of lots of people who said if it was rebuilt, we would feel more confident that it would be there in 50 years' time. If our market was in a new building that captured some of the heritage and the features that we love, the wide open spaces, the gathering places, the airy feel, but rebuilt, we would feel confident we would have it in 50 years' time. And I think we should be open-minded about that. And I think that that is the direction we have taken, and I hope it's the direction councillors will continue to take.
Councillor Lawrence.
I've got a question.
We've entered into debate. There's no questions allowed. Would you like to speak to the motion amendment?
Motion.
The motion.
Am I the seconder of this motion?
Seconder.
Yes.
Of the original motion that's now been amended?
Yes.
And is now in that
And there's no right of reply, but you can speak to this particular substantive motion.
Yes, look, I'm still kind of, I suppose, been on and off council the last 4 years, but I'm still amazed we don't have a set of height controls. And we did have a set of height controls in a structure plan from a long time ago. And I was involved in the North Horizons height control. And naturally, those maximum heights only refer to certain points in a building area. And there's usually some other height controls that would go 10, 8, 6, etc. So that's what we normally expect. And my question, I'm just wondering, with the Heart of Preston, is I still don't see a design development overlay. I don't see a range of heights. I don't see a recommendation from this council that may or may not reflect community, but will reflect considerations. I don't see that. I see a silence. And I find it interesting people are willing to debate things, but they're never willing to commit in this chamber. And we seem to be going in a circle about what do we think that site can cope with. And obviously we've already preempted that in some ways with some of the proposals we've already approved. Of course, we've already committed to a level of development by other sites that we've already considered, including Northcote Plaza, including Summerhill, including Bell, and including some of the applications that have been voted in here.
10
I'm just
seconds.
not sure why the aversion to having an opinion about the built form there. How that doesn't seem like planning to me.
Do we have any councillors? Are there any further speakers? You don't have a right reply.
I would like to propose an amendment to the
Would you
motion.
like to foreshadow? Yep.
Can't because he's the mover.
No, you can't.
As an amendment, I can propose an amendment.
No,
Sorry,
through you.
councillor, as the mover of the original motion, you can't move an amendment.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Yep.
You've already spoken,
You've already
to
spoken.
the substantive motion.
Okay, that's fine then. Thank you.
Can't keep up. There's so many of them. Are there any
If
further?
I have a question, can...
We're into the debate. There's no further.
yeah, no, I have a question, Mayor Messina. I would like to withdraw my notice of motion,
I don't think you can, councillor, once the debate
because
is...
it no longer reflects the intent of my motion.
Can I just get some...
Yes, well, I'll just get some governance advice on that. Thank you, Councillor Greco.
So, councillor, clause 6.4 of the governance rules prevents the withdrawal of the notice of motion once by the mover or the seconder after the debate is commenced. Sorry.
Therefore, we cannot withdraw your notice of motion. Are there any further speakers? Councillors, there's no further debate. I'd like to put this particular motion up on the chamber and ask for all those in favour of this particular motion. All those against? That motion is carried. Councillors, community, I just want to express that what this particular motion just does is ask for a briefing. It does not stop our advocacy position. It does not change anything. We still continue to fight for what we want at the Presto Market. So I need to make that clear. Councillors, now item number 10, urgent business, there is none. Item 11, reports of standing committees, there are none. Item 12, summary of advisory committees, councillors' briefings and meetings. Councillors, do I have a mover of the recommendation? Moved by Councillor McCarthy. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Rennie, sorry. Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak to the motion?
I've got nothing to say other than...
Put that straight to the vote then. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Councillors, item number 13, reports of mayors and councillors. Councillor, is there a mover for the recommendation? Can I also note that the report is tabled in our online portal? Is there a mover? Councillor Lawrence, moved by and seconded by Councillor Newton. Now we put that straight to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Item 14, consideration of reports considered confidential. There are none. Before I'd like to go, I'd like to invite councillors to say a few words, considering that this is our first time as council, this council during this term for Christmas, and I was wondering if there was a few councillors that'd like to say a few words. Can I call on councillors perhaps who would like to say a few words before the evening is closed? Can I have a show of hands?
Can I just ask if we could have a 60-second time limit or two?
Yes, sure.
I don't know what you had, but
60
just
seconds.
might be good to have a clock.
Yep. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak?
Sure.
That's what you were intending to, sorry.
There's no doubt that 2020 is a year that we will remember, and it's been a very difficult year. But through 2020, we have seen so many people in our community shine in so many different ways, and particularly the heartwarming way in which neighbours have come out and supported neighbours, community members have supported community members, and some of those acts of solidarity and kindness and connection are, I hope, the things that as time goes on will characterise the year for people and I hope that we will retain some of those strengths through the struggles and through the feeling that many of us have that we just want the year to be over. Today I gathered with work colleagues for the end of the year and gave them a tiny symbolic gift, which was an eraser. And I said, this is so you can rub out all the bits of the year that you'd rather forget. Noting that I hope for everyone there will be some part of the year that we don't want to forget. And that might be the part where we discovered nature. It might be the part of the year where we met neighbours we hadn't met before. And I'll stop there and wish everyone a very wonderful, safe and happy festive season and holiday.
Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor, and congratulate you on this. Is a really lovely way to end the year. I actually want to say a big thank you to not the people around this room who we get to come in here and do what we do, but all the people sitting around us and in there throughout the day and in fact, probably for most of the part of the year, in their homes, which are the council staff, the council workers, from the management administration level all the way through to people that work for us only a few hours a week, in some cases, in home care and other roles, and people that were willing to do things this year because we gave them the opportunity, but also because they were willing to stay connected with the organisation. So those staff who couldn't do those normal jobs, such as our bar manager at the Northcote Town Hall, who became a great planter in the bush crew, and our library staff, and basically everyone who got in and mucked in. I want to say a huge thank you for your efforts, and please, I hope you get time with your family and friends to just take that moment and recover and recuperate. It's been an incredibly hard year, and the workers are profound people in this organisation, and we owe them a great debt of thanks.
It's time. Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Demetriadis.
Hi, I'd also like to wish our community a happy holiday season. This year has been a tough year for many of us, and as we look forward to 2021, I would like to wish all the council staff, our Darebin residents and businesses, all elected representatives and the wider community, season's greetings and a world of good wishes. Thank you to everyone for doing their bit in the fight against COVID. I wish you all the very best for the new year. May it be filled with health, happiness and prosperity. I look forward to working with the community to make Darebin the best it can be, and I always will welcome any conversations or discussions from community members. Please say hi and come and have a chat when you see me down the street. We are all here to help, and together we can achieve great things. May 2021 be the best year yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demetriadis. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you. I'll just echo all the good things that my fellow councillors have said, and to again recognise the hardship that many people in our council have faced, as well as the actions and sacrifices that normal residents have made, as well as our hard-working council staff. I'd just like to make the point that, as Councillor Rennie has said, many of us would like to put the last year behind us and are really looking forward to 1st of January. There's many in our community also with the changes to JobKeeper in particular, who are kind of dreading that 1st of January. So just for everyone to continue to keep thinking of those who are struggling, and we are also, as every summer now, keeping sort of bracing for the extreme weather which may hit us. So with that in mind, I hope everyone has a peaceful and safe and healthy break and a well-earned rest before heading into next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannan. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I think what I wanted to say was we had a time this year when we couldn't go further than 5 kilometres from home, and I think that I really found that Darebin was a place that I still really loved to be, and I felt that all my needs were met being in Darebin. And I think if I think about the Merry Creek, which I went to every day, or the Darebin Parklands, which was just on my 5K border, the work of the Parks and Gardens team and all of our staff that have made this a place that my needs, and I think many people's other needs, could be met within that 5 kilometres was incredible, and I don't think I'd realised that before. So for me, that was a huge opportunity this year, and like others, really looking forward to saying goodbye to 2020 and very much looking forward to the next 4 years ahead for council.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there any further Councillor Williams.
2020 has been a rollercoaster of a year that hasn't been easy for anyone. I firstly would like to especially say thanks to our CEO, officers, including garbage collectors, carers, through to our community groups that have come together and helped our most vulnerable in the community, and the many, many hardworking small businesses adapting to the way they do business during the pandemic crisis. I hope everybody finds a way to continue supporting our local businesses because they have worked tirelessly to bring their dreams come to fruition so they too continue serving the community. Schools was moved to from school ground to homeschooling. Many parents, including myself, struggled with this new way of life. With further restrictions of not being able to visit loved ones, wearing face masks, limited to the amount of toilet paper that you could purchase, restricted to only travelling 5 kilometres zone of your home, and only able to have 10 people attending a funeral. From the bottom of my heart, it has been quite remarkable seeing everyone, everyday residents coming together and volunteering their time and energy, helping strangers and finding ways, encouraging and supporting one another. I'm incredibly humble and blessed to be living in Darebin. It's certainly been an extraordinarily big year, one we'll never forget. I would like to wish everyone a restful, happy, festive holiday and best wishes for the coming year.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina, and I thank the councillors who have spoken before, and thank the staff and thanked our community and recognised our community in the great struggle. And I hope everyone here and everyone in the community has a great rest over the coming few weeks. And next year, COVID isn't just something that you flick over. I think there's some lasting scars, financial, emotional, mental, that many of us carry. And so I think one of my hopes next year, probably in this role, is that we can probably try and be gentler and kinder than some other levels of government. And hopefully the reset button shouldn't be the kind of reset button we've seen just down at Bell City, at Mantra, just recently. We shouldn't be going back to that. And I'm very confident that this council will embrace a healing and a restorative governance for this city. So, and congratulate both old councillors and new councillors in the coming new year.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Look, this year's really been a big year, and it's obviously been an unforgettable year for many of us. It's touched everyone in our community and essentially right across the world. We've seen how the public sector and the social sector has come to the rescue, together with community solidarity in terms of trying to hold people and communities and societies together. And we owe it to the public sector, and we're part of that sector, being a local government. We've seen that just most recently with the refugees and the support that we've lent the refugees over this time, and that struggle is not over. Finally, I'd just like to thank the management team for all their patience and all the work that they've done this year. It's been particularly strenuous in terms of, it's been off script, completely off script. Usually local government works a lot on script, but this year's been completely off script for our management team. And not only our management team, but the people that make it happen, which are the staff, the 1,300 staff in the council. And also I think we should extend a special thank you to our advisory committees, and also for our community that has supported us, voted us in, given over their trust to us in terms of making things happen for the City of Darebin. And finally, I'd just like to wish everyone all the best for the festive season.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Thank you, councillors. I guess I just want to echo what everybody has said, and as we head through this festive season and the end of a really, really hard year, I want to take the opportunity and personally thank our amazing staff, as we've indicated, our CEO, the volunteers, for the amazing work and resilience up against the adversity and the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you to the staff again. Thank you to the community. Thank you all who are listening tonight. Summer's approaching, it's actually here, but I just want to echo the importance of stimulating our microeconomy, ensuring that we support our traders, our manufacturers, our service providers, our creatives, our community, the sports club, our musician and our artists who have been severely in a position where, of course, they've lost their livelihood for some time. Go local, because when you go local, you grow local. I just want to say thank you. Merry Christmas. From my family to yours, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. And I'm just going to say something in my own language. Bon Natale. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all next year. Ciao. Oh, I declare the meeting closed. Sorry.